I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. At 1 a.m., my daughter collapsed at my doorstep. Her eye was bruised, her lips split open. Through tears, she whispered, "Mom, James hit me because of his mistress." In that moment, I felt my world shatter. Without a word, I put on my police uniform and prepared for battle. No one hurts my child and walks away. The television flickered in the dim light of my living room as I slumped into my worn leather couch. My muscles ached after a grueling 12-hour shift. Being a police officer in this town wasn't always dramatic, but today had been particularly exhausting. I'd broken up a bar fight downtown and spent hours writing up the report. Outside, dogs barked and motorcycles roared through the quiet neighborhood. It was already 1 a.m., but some folks never seemed to sleep. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise, desperately craving rest. Then came the knocking, frantic, and desperate rattling my front door. My police instincts kicked in immediately. I approached cautiously, heart racing. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. No answer came, just weaker knocks followed by a choked, trembling voice. "Mom, please open up." Jessica, my daughter. I yanked the door open to find my beautiful girl swaying on the doorstep, barely able to stand. When she collapsed into my arms, I felt her body trembling like a wounded animal. "Jessica, honey, what happened?" I asked, my voice breaking. The yellow porch light illuminated her face, and my heart stopped. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, deep purple bruising spreading across her delicate skin. Her lip was split. Dried blood crusted at the corner of her mouth. She clutched her stomach, her knuckles white with the effort. "James," she whispered through sobs. "He hit me. Because of his mistress." My blood ran cold, then boiled with rage. James Anderson, my son-in-law of 3 years, the man I had welcomed into our family, had done this to my baby girl. I helped Jessica inside, laying her gently on the couch before rushing for my first aid kit. As I dabbed the blood from her lip, she winced in pain. The cut was deep, not just a surface wound, but something that would leave a scar. "Let me see your stomach," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the fury building inside me. When I lifted her blouse, I gasped. A massive black and purple bruise spread across her abdomen. This wasn't just a slap in anger. This was calculated cruelty. "Did James do this to you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jessica just sobbed harder. I reached for my phone to call Dr. Maria Gonzalez at the emergency room. "Maria, I'm bringing my daughter in. Please be ready." While waiting for the taxi, my car was in the shop. I noticed Jessica's phone lighting up repeatedly. 7 missed calls from James. I glimpsed a text message on her lock screen. "Open your mouth and you'll lose everything." I reached for the phone, but Jessica snatched it away with surprising strength. "Mom, don't," she pleaded, her eyes wild with fear. I didn't push. Instead, I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I'm here, baby. You're safe now." The taxi ride to the hospital was excruciating. Jessica hunched over, her head on my shoulder, repeating, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to bother you this late, but I couldn't take it anymore." Each word stabbed at my heart. I was her mother. I had sworn to protect her. Yet she felt she needed to apologize for seeking safety. At the emergency room, Dr. Maria Gonzalez was waiting, her face grave when she saw Jessica's condition. She led us to an examination room, where a nurse gently helped Jessica remove her cardigan. That's when I saw the rest. Finger-shaped bruises on her wrists and shoulders, telling a story of restraint and control. I gripped the edge of the metal table, struggling to contain my rage. "We need to do some tests," Dr. Gonzalez said quietly. "X-rays for possible fractured ribs, and—" She hesitated, glancing at me. "And an ultrasound." "Ultrasound," I repeated, confused. Dr. Gonzalez placed a gentle hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Jessica, when was your last period?" My daughter's tear-filled eyes widened. "About 6 weeks ago," she whispered. The doctor nodded. "That's what I thought. We need to check on the baby." Baby. The word hit me like a physical blow. My daughter was pregnant, and James had beaten her in the stomach. While Jessica underwent tests, I paced the waiting room, my phone vibrating in my pocket. An unknown number, James. I was certain. I declined the call, fury building within me. When I returned to the examination room, Jessica had fallen into a fitful sleep, exhaustion finally claiming her. Doctor, Gonzalez motioned me into the hallway. Patricia, she said, her voice professional but kind. Jessica has multiple contusions consistent with ongoing physical abuse. Some of these bruises are weeks old. I felt sick. And the baby? There's a heartbeat, which is good news. The fetus is approximately 6 weeks along, but there's some bleeding behind the placenta. She needs complete bed rest and monitoring. This is a threatened miscarriage. Patricia. I nodded, numb with shock. I'm also concerned about these older injuries. Dr. Gonzalez continued, showing me photos she'd taken for medical documentation. This isn't the first time she's been hurt. She never told me, I whispered, self-recrimination washing over me. How had I missed the signs I was a police officer, trained to spot domestic violence, yet I'd failed to see it in my own daughter's marriage? Victims rarely do, Dr. Gonzalez said gently, especially when the abuser has isolated them from support systems. I took Jessica home after they administered IV fluids and pain medication. She slept in my bed, while I sat beside her, watching her bruised face in the dim light, planning my next move. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would not let James get away with this. I would use every ounce of my training as a police officer to build a case against him. Jessica and her unborn child deserved justice, and I would make sure they got it. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as Jessica stirred in my bed. Her swollen eye looked even worse in daylight, the purple-black bruise a stark contrast against her pale skin. She winced as she tried to sit up. Easy, honey, I said, helping her adjust the pillows. Dr. Gonzalez said you need complete bed rest. Jessica's hand instinctively went to her stomach. The baby, she whispered. There's a heartbeat, I assured her. But you're at risk for miscarriage. You need to take it easy. I brought her a bowl of chicken soup, the aroma of herbs filling the room. She took a spoonful reluctantly, swallowing with difficulty. Mom, she began, her voice trembling. I need to tell you everything. For the next hour, Jessica unraveled a story that broke my heart. The abuse had started subtly 8 months ago. Criticism, controlling behavior, monitoring her phone and friends. Then came the first slap after a dinner party when she embarrassed him by disagreeing about politics. She had believed him when he cried and apologized, promising it would never happen again. But it did happen again, and again. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, fighting to keep accusation from my voice. He said no one would believe me, that you'd think I was exaggerating. She looked away. And he threatened to hurt you if I ever told anyone. My phone rang James again. I showed Jessica the screen. He'll keep calling, she said, panic rising in her voice. If I don't answer, he'll come looking for me. Let him try, I said grimly. I took out the SIM card from her phone and replaced it with a spare I had. He can't track you now. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text notification before I could remove the original SIM. I glimpsed the message. You better be dead if you're not answering. Your mother won't protect you forever. I took photos of the text, documenting everything. Then I called Commander David Rosales, my trusted colleague at the station. David, I need a favor, I began, explaining the situation briefly. Jesus, Patricia, he said. Of course I'll help. I'll send a patrol car to watch your house. What do you need? I need to build a case, by the book. Everything legal and documented so it stands up in court. You got it. I'll contact Michael Ellison for you too, best family lawyer in town. While Jessica rested, I spoke with my neighbor, Martha Simmons, a retired school teacher who had lived across the street for 30 years. When I told her what happened, her eyes flashed with anger. That poor girl, she said, shaking her head. I've never liked that man. Too smooth, like a snake oil salesman. Martha, did your security camera catch anything last night? I asked. She nodded vigorously. It did. Come see. On her phone screen, I watched footage of Jessica at my front door, knocking desperately, her body hunched in pain. The timestamp read 1:02 a.m. I recorded the video on my phone, another piece of evidence. If you need a place for Jessica to stay, my guest room is available. Martha offered. James might look for her here first. I squeezed her hand gratefully. You're a lifesaver. Martha, when I returned home, I found Jessica sitting up in bed, staring at her phone, face pale. He's been calling my friends, trying to find me, she whispered. He threatened Alicia when she wouldn't tell him where I might be. I sat beside her. Jessica, we need to talk about pressing charges. Her eyes widened with fear. Mom, if I do that, he'll what hurt you more than he already has. I took her hands. You're carrying his child, and he beat you in the stomach. What kind of father does that make him? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm so scared. Mom, I know, baby, but I'm a cop. I know how to build a case. And I have friends who will help. I gestured to her bruised face and stomach. We have physical evidence, medical documentation, threatening texts, and I suspect there's more we'll find. She looked down. He's been moving money from our joint account, thousands of dollars. When I asked about it, that's when she gestured to her face. I nodded, adding financial abuse to the growing list of charges. Do you have access to the account statements? On my laptop at home. But I can't go back there. Mom, I just can't. You won't have to, I promised. I'll take care of everything. That afternoon, I drove Jessica to Martha's house, taking a circuitous route to ensure we weren't followed. Martha welcomed her with open arms, showing her to a cozy guest room with blackout curtains. No one will know you're here, dear, Martha assured her. And I've got my shotgun if that man comes sniffing around. I raised an eyebrow, and Martha shrugged. 20 years married to a hunter teaches you a few things. I met with Michael Ellison, the family lawyer, later that day. In his wood-paneled office, I laid out everything we knew so far. This is a strong start, Michael said, reviewing the photos and medical report. But we need more. Financial records, a history of controlling behavior, witnesses if possible. Jessica mentioned large sums missing from their joint account, I said. Michael nodded. Good. We'll need those statements. And Patricia, there's something else we should look into. Property records. Sometimes abusers try to secure assets before things fall apart. The suggestion triggered a memory. Jessica had mentioned something about James wanting her to sign papers for the house recently. I'm on it, I said, already planning my next move. As I left Michael's office, my phone rang. David Rosales. Patricia, I've been doing some digging on your son-in-law, he said without preamble. He has a sealed juvenile record and a complaint filed against him by an ex-girlfriend 5 years ago. She dropped the charges, but the report mentions a pattern of controlling behavior and intimidation. My grip tightened on the phone. Can you get me that report? Already sent it to your email. And Patricia, be careful. Men like this, when they feel cornered. I know, I said grimly. That's why I need to move quickly. Back at home, I sat at my dining table surrounded by documents, the medical report, photos of Jessica's injuries, screenshots of threatening texts, and the police report David had sent me. A pattern was emerging, one of escalating violence and control. I opened my laptop and began searching property records for James and Jessica's house. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 days ago, James had filed paperwork to remove Jessica's name from the deed, claiming she had willingly signed over her interest. I knew my daughter would never do that. This wasn't just abuse, it was calculated, premeditated fraud. I called Thomas Alvarez at the county records office, an old friend who had helped me with cases before. Tommy, I need to see the actual document with my daughter's signature, I said after explaining the situation. Come by tomorrow morning, he said. And Patricia, if your suspicions are right, this is felony fraud. I nodded grimly, though he couldn't see me. One more charge to add to James Anderson's growing list of crimes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Jessica's bruised face, kept hearing her sobs. I got up and put on my police uniform, feeling its familiar weight like armor. standing before the mirror. I made a silent vow. James Anderson had picked the wrong woman's daughter to abuse. He had no idea who he was dealing with, but I did, and I was just getting started. The county records office smelled of dust and old paper. Thomas Alvarez led me to a back room where he spread out the property transfer documents on a metal desk. "Here it is," he said, pointing to a signature at the bottom. Supposedly Jessica's. I examined it closely. The shaky scrawl looked nothing like my daughter's neat, looping handwriting. "This is forged," I said. Anger building in my chest. Thomas nodded. "I thought it looked suspicious. The notary stamp is from Pete's check cashing on 5th Street. Not exactly a reputable place." "Who submitted these papers?" "Your son-in-law came in person. Told Margie at the front desk that you and Jessica were too busy to come yourselves." Thomas shook his head. "Someone inside helped push this through without proper verification. I took photos of the documents with my phone. I need copies of everything. Tommy. Already made them." He handed me a folder. "Patricia, be careful. If James has someone inside the county office helping him, he might have other connections too." His warning echoed in my mind as I drove to meet with Michael Ellison. The lawyer reviewed the forged documents, his expression grave. "This is serious fraud," he said. "Combined with the domestic violence and financial manipulation, we're building a strong case." He tapped his pen against the desk. "But we need to move carefully. If James suspects we're gathering evidence, he might escalate or destroy proof." "I want to check their house when he's not there," I said. Jessica mentioned financial documents on her laptop. Michael looked concerned. "Do you have a key?" "Yes, and it's still Jessica's legal residence. I'll be accompanying the victim to retrieve her personal belongings." "Just be careful," Michael advised. "Document everything. Don't take anything that isn't clearly Jessica's. And don't stay long." I nodded, already planning my next move. That afternoon, I drove to Martha's house to check on Jessica. She was looking marginally better, the swelling in her face slightly reduced, though the bruising had darkened to a deep purple-black. "The bleeding has stopped," she told me quietly, hands resting on her stomach. "Dr. Gonzalez says that's a good sign for the baby." I sat beside her on the bed. "Jessica, I need to ask you something important. Did you sign any property documents recently? Anything about the house?" Her brow furrowed. "No. James mentioned something about refinancing, but I never signed anything." I showed her a photo of the forged signature. Her eyes widened. "That's not mine," she whispered. "He forged my signature." The realization seemed to shake her deeply. "What else has he been doing behind my back?" "That's what we need to find out. Do you know when James usually works at the pawn shop?" "Tuesdays and Thursdays he stays late for inventory, until about 9 p.m. Today was Thursday. Perfect. I need to get your laptop and any financial documents from the house. Is there anything else you need?" Jessica thought for a moment. "My prenatal vitamins, some clothes, and..." She hesitated. "There's a small wooden box in the back of my closet. It has my grandmother's jewelry and some personal papers." I squeezed her hand. "I'll get them. Don't worry." After making sure Jessica was comfortable, I met with David Rosales to plan the house visit. "I'll have a patrol car nearby, but not visible," he assured me. "If anything feels off, you call immediately." At 7 p.m., I drove to Jessica and James's modest 2-story home in a quiet subdivision. The place looked peaceful from outside trimmed lawn, potted plants on the porch, a basketball hoop in the driveway. No one would suspect the violence that had occurred inside. I used Jessica's key to enter, turning on lights and moving efficiently. In the master bedroom, I found her laptop and charger. The wooden box was exactly where she said it would be, hidden beneath sweaters in her closet. I gathered clothes, toiletries, and her vitamins from the bathroom. Then I began looking for financial documents. In the home office, I found a filing cabinet locked, using my police training. I had it open in seconds. Inside were neatly labeled folders: mortgage, insurance, investments, taxes. I photographed everything, careful not to disturb the order. One folder labeled Lake Property caught my attention. Inside were documents for a lakefront cabin purchased 3 months ago solely in James's name. The down payment had come from their joint savings account. Jessica had never mentioned a lake house. I doubted she knew about it. As I continued searching, I found a hidden compartment in James's desk drawer. Inside was a small notebook with handwritten entries, dates, amounts, and initials. It looked like a record of loans with exorbitant interest rates. Was James running a loan shark operation out of his pawn shop? I photographed every page, then carefully replaced everything. In the kitchen, I noticed a stack of mail. On top was an envelope addressed to Rachel Moore at this address. Jessica had mentioned a woman named Rachel James's mistress. Was she living here? I opened the envelope and found a credit card statement with charges for expensive restaurants, jewelry stores, and hotels all paid from James and Jessica's joint account. My phone vibrated with a text from David J. Leaving shop now. Get out. I quickly gathered Jessica's belongings and the evidence I'd collected, making sure everything else looked untouched. I was backing out of the driveway when headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, a silver truck turning onto the street. James. I drove past him, keeping my face turned away. In the mirror, I saw him pull into the driveway, apparently not recognizing my car in the darkness. Back at my house, I spread out the evidence on my dining table, the lake property documents, the loan records, the credit card statement for Rachel Moore. Combined with the forged property transfer, they painted a picture of a man systematically stealing from his wife while carrying on an affair. I called Michael Ellison. I found evidence of financial fraud, possible loan sharking, and a secret property purchase. I told him. Plus, his mistress is receiving mail at their house and charging expenses to their joint account. Excellent work, Patricia, Michael said. This strengthens our case considerably. With the domestic violence charges and now this financial fraud, James could be looking at serious jail time. Next, I called David Rosales. David, I need information on Rachel Moore. Anything you can find. I'll run her through the system. And Patricia. We got the surveillance footage from the pawn shop. It shows James leaving early yesterday, around the time Jessica was attacked. His alibi about working late is blown. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. That night, I added all the new evidence to my growing file. Tomorrow, I would visit Arch's bar, the place Jessica mentioned James frequented with his mistress. I needed to see Rachel Moore for myself, to understand exactly what I was dealing with. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Patricia Williams, a woman's voice, hesitant and unfamiliar. Yes. Who's this? My name is Emily Winters. I used to date James Anderson, before he met your daughter. She paused. I saw him today. He was angry, saying things about Jessica running to her cop mother. It brought back memories I've tried to forget. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of memories? Emily? The kind that left scars. Her voice wavered. I never pressed charges. I was too scared. But if Jessica is going through what I did, I want to help. A potential witness, someone who could establish a pattern of abuse. Can we meet tomorrow? I asked. Yes, Emily agreed. But somewhere private. James has friends everywhere. I suggested a coffee shop in the next town over, and she agreed. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, mind racing with this new development. James Anderson's past was catching up to him, and I was the one bringing it to his doorstep. The Sunrise Cafe in Millfield, 20 miles from our town, was nearly empty when I arrived the next morning. I chose a booth in this back corner with a clear view of the entrance and ordered coffee while I waited. Emily Winters arrived precisely on time, a slender woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and watchful eyes. She scanned the cafe before approaching my table. Patricia, she asked quietly. I nodded, and she slid into the seat across from me. Up close, I noticed a thin scar running along her jawline, partially concealed with makeup. Thank you for meeting me, I said. Emily's hands fidgeted with a paper napkin. I almost didn't come. I've spent 2 years trying to forget James Anderson. What happened between you and James? I asked gently. She took a deep breath. We dated for about a year. At first, he was charming, attentive. Then he changed. He started criticizing everything: my clothes, my friends, how I spoke. He needed to know where I was every minute. The pattern sounded familiar, exactly what Jessica had described. When did it become physical? I asked. Emily's eyes met mine. After about 6 months. A slap at first. He cried afterward. Begged forgiveness. I believed him. She touched the scar on her jaw. The last time, he threw me against a glass coffee table. 27 stitches. I told the hospital I fell. Why didn't you report him? I tried. Filed a police report. But then, she looked down. He threatened my sister's kids. Said he'd make sure I never saw them again. I dropped the charges and moved to Columbus. I only came back last year when my mother got sick. I took out a notebook. Emily, would you be willing to make a formal statement? It could help protect my daughter. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I should have done it years ago. For the next hour, Emily detailed her relationship with James, the control, isolation, and escalating violence. The pattern matched Jessica's experience almost exactly. There's something else you should know, Emily said as we finished. James has a temper, but he's calculating too. He records conversations, keeps evidence to use against people. And he has friends in the police department. This caught my attention. Who? Officer Kevin Reynolds. They grew up together. Kevin helped make sure my police report got lost after I dropped the charges. I knew Reynolds, a patrol officer with a mediocre record. I'd need to be careful around him. After saying goodbye to Emily and arranging for her to meet with Michael Ellison, I drove to the Arches bar. It was early afternoon, and the place was mostly empty. I took a seat at the counter, ordered a soda, and struck up a conversation with the bartender, a heavy-set man named Lou. Quiet day, I commented. Lou shrugged. Always is until happy hour. You new around here? I nodded. Just passing through. Friend of mine mentioned a woman who works here. Rachel Moore. Lou's expression shifted subtly. Rachel doesn't work here. She's a regular, though. Tall, blonde, I asked, describing the woman Jessica had mentioned. That's her. Usually comes in with that pawn shop guy. James? Quite the pair. Lou leaned closer. Between us, they're not subtle about being more than friends, if you know what I mean. His poor wife has no idea. I kept my face neutral. When do they usually come in? Friday nights, mostly, sometimes Tuesdays. Today was Friday. I thanked Lou and left, formulating a plan. I'd return that evening to observe James and Rachel together, gathering more evidence for our case, back at Martha's house. I found Jessica sitting in the sunroom, looking more alert than she had in days. The bruises on her face had begun to fade to a yellowish green. The doctor called, she said when I entered. The baby's heartbeat is stronger. She thinks the worst danger has passed. Relief washed over me. That's wonderful news, honey. I hesitated, then showed her the photos I'd taken at the house, the lake property documents, the credit card statements. Did you know about any of this? I asked gently. Jessica's expression crumpled. The lake house, no. And Rachel's been using our account. She shook her head in disbelief. All those times he said we needed to cut back on expenses because business was slow. He was spending our money on her. I took her hand. Jessica, I met with Emily Winters today. She dated James before you. He mentioned an ex named Emily once, said she was unstable, made up lies about him. She's not unstable. She's another victim. James abused her too, badly enough to put her in the hospital. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. How did I not see who he really was? Abusers are expert manipulators, I said, recalling my police training. They show you what you want to see until they have control. Jessica wiped her eyes. What happens now? We keep building our case. I'm going to Arch's bar tonight to document his relationship with Rachel. Be careful, Mom, Jessica said, worry creasing her brow. James is dangerous when he feels threatened. I know how to handle myself, I assured her. I've been a cop for 25 years. That evening, I dressed in jeans and a nondescript sweater, my hair pulled back under a baseball cap. I arrived at Arch's bar around 8 p.m., taking a booth in the corner with a good view of the entrance but partially obscured by a support column. At 8:30, James entered with a tall blonde woman in a tight red dress, Rachel Moore. They took a booth on the opposite side, James's arm possessively around her waist. From my position, I could see them clearly but remained hidden from their direct line of sight. I discreetly took photos with my phone as they drank and displayed affection, publicly kissing, his hand on her thigh. Anyone watching would never guess James was a married man. After an hour, they left together. I followed at a safe distance, watching them drive to a small motel on the edge of town, more evidence of the affair, before heading home. I stopped at the police station to meet with David Rosales in his office. I shared the new information from Emily Winters and my observations of James and Rachel. "We've got a solid case building," David said. "Domestic violence, financial fraud, forgery. And now we have a previous victim willing to testify about his pattern of abuse." "What about Rachel Moore?" I asked. "What did you find on her?" David opened a folder. 26 years old, works at Elegant Touch Spa as a massage therapist, multiple maxed-out credit cards, a repossessed car last year, and an eviction from her apartment 3 months ago. He looked up. "Guess when she suddenly became financially stable again?" "When she met James," I concluded. "Exactly. And there's more. The lake property James purchased Rachel's name is on the utilities." I leaned back, processing this information. So he's setting up a love nest with his mistress using money stolen from his pregnant wife. And he beat Jessica when she started asking questions about the missing funds. David nodded grimly. "Looks that way. Patricia, we have enough to make an arrest now." "Not yet," I said, surprising myself. "We need to make this airtight. James has connections. Emily mentioned Officer Reynolds. I want to make sure there are no loopholes he can slip through." "What's your plan?" I considered for a moment. "I need to confront him directly. Let him know I have evidence. See how he reacts." David frowned. "That's risky, Patricia. I know. But sometimes you need to flush the prey into the open." "At least wear a wire," David insisted. "Let me have backup nearby," I agreed, knowing this confrontation would be the first major test in our case against James. If he threatened me or admitted to hurting Jessica, we'd have even more evidence to use against him. As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything we'd uncovered. James Anderson wasn't just an abuser, he was a calculating predator who had systematically isolated and terrorized my daughter while stealing her money to fund his affair. Tomorrow, I would confront him at his pawn shop. I would look into the eyes of the man who had beaten my pregnant daughter and let him know that his days of impunity were numbered. The game was changing, and James Anderson had no idea what was coming for him. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool. I sat at my kitchen table reviewing all the evidence we'd gathered: medical reports documenting Jessica's injuries, photographs of the bruises, the forged property documents, financial records showing James's theft, and pictures of him with Rachel at the bar and motel. My phone rang. It was Michael Ellison. "Patricia, I just met with Emily Winters. Her testimony is compelling and consistent with Jessica's experience. She's willing to go on record about the abuse she suffered." "That's excellent news," I said. "I'm planning to confront James today." Michael paused. "Are you sure that's wise? Men like James can be unpredictable when cornered." "David Rosales will have officers nearby, and I'll be wearing a wire. We need to see how James reacts when confronted." "Just be careful," Michael advised. "Document everything, but don't put yourself at risk." After hanging up, I called Jessica at Martha's house. Her voice sounded stronger today. "How are you feeling, honey?" I asked. "Better. The nausea isn't as bad this morning." She paused. "Mom, James has been calling Martha's neighbors, asking if they've seen me. He's getting desperate." My grip tightened on the phone. "Has he come to the house?" "No, but Martha saw his truck driving by yesterday. I'll have a patrol car watch the house," I promised. "Jessica, I'm going to confront James today. I want him to know we have evidence against him." "Mom, no." Jessica's voice filled with fear. "He's dangerous." "I'll be careful," I assured her. "But we need to send a clear message that he can't intimidate us anymore." After our call, I met with David at the station. He fitted me with a small recording device and gave me a panic button. "Officer Bradley will be parked across from the pawn shop in an unmarked car," David explained. "If anything goes wrong, press this button, and we'll be there in seconds." I nodded, feeling the weight of the wire beneath my blouse. This wasn't my first undercover operation, but it was certainly the most personal. At 11 a.m., I drove to Anderson's Pawn and Loan, a brick building with barred windows and a faded sign. Through the window, I could see James behind the counter, talking to a customer. Two men I recognized as his employees, local troublemakers nicknamed the Twins, were arranging merchandise on shelves. I waited until the customer left, then entered. A bell jangled above the door, and all three men looked up. James's expression shifted from professional to wary when he recognized me. "Well, if it isn't my mother-in-law," he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Officer Williams." I approached the counter, maintaining eye contact. "I think you know why I'm here, James." He spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I have no idea. Is Jessica with you? She didn't come home Thursday night. I've been worried sick." The audacity of his lie made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. "Jessica is safe. Away from you." James's smile faltered. "What are you talking about? We had a little argument, sure, but—" "A little argument," I interrupted, placing a folder on the counter. "Is that what you call this?" I opened the folder to reveal photos of Jessica's bruised face and abdomen. James glanced at them, then quickly looked away. "She fell," he said dismissively. "Jessica's always been clumsy. You know that." "She fell repeatedly, in patterns that exactly match handprints," I asked coldly. "She fell hard enough to threaten the life of your unborn child." That got his attention. His eyes widened slightly. "What child? Jessica's not pregnant." 6 weeks along, I sadly said. "The doctor confirmed it after you beat her so badly she nearly miscarried." James's face darkened. "She's lying. If she's pregnant, it's not mine." The twins exchanged uncomfortable glances. This clearly wasn't the conversation they'd expected to witness. "We both know that's not true," I said evenly. "Just like we both know you forged Jessica's signature to remove her name from your house deed." James straightened, his eyes narrowing. "You're making serious accusations, Patricia." "Without proof," I smiled thinly. "Oh, I have proof. The forged documents, the medical reports, your secret lake house purchased with money from Jessica's inheritance, the credit card statements showing you funding your affair with Rachel Moore." At the mention of Rachel, James's composure cracked. He slammed his hand on the counter. "You've been spying on me." "No, James, I've been building a case against you. Domestic violence, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation." I leaned forward. "Emily Winters sends her regards. By the way," all color drained from his face. "Emily, what does she have to do with anything? She's testified about the abuse she suffered at your hands. The pattern is identical to what Jessica experienced." I gathered the photos, returning them to the folder. "You're finished, James. Your days of hurting women are over." He came around the counter, moving toward me with menace in his eyes. "You think you can threaten me in my own business?" I stood my ground. "It's not a threat. It's a promise. We have enough evidence to put you away for years." "No one will believe you," he snarled. "I have friends in this town. Your precious daughter deserved what she got. Always questioning me, checking the accounts, acting like she had a right to know where every penny went." There it was, an admission of guilt, recorded for posterity. "Stay away from Jessica," I warned. "If you try to contact her or intimidate her in any way, I'll have you arrested immediately." James laughed coldly. "You think a restraining order will stop me? I own this town, and I own your daughter." "Not anymore," I said firmly. "Consider this your only warning." As I turned to leave, James called after me. "If you walk out that door, you're declaring war, Patricia, and trust me, you don't want me as an enemy." I paused, looking back at him. "The war started the moment you laid hands on my daughter." Outside, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned. James had effectively admitted to abusing Jessica and had threatened both of us on record. I met David at a pre-arranged location to hand over the recording device. "You got him," David said after listening to the exchange. "He practically confessed." "Not practically," I corrected. "He did confess, and he threatened us both. This is excellent evidence, David agreed. Combined with everything else, we have a solid case. What's next? I asked. We file for an emergency protective order for both Jessica and you. Then we present all evidence to the district attorney. With what we have, they should approve an arrest warrant. I nodded, relief mixing with determination. How soon? The protective order can be in place by this evening. The arrest warrant might take until Monday or Tuesday. 2 or 3 days. It seemed both incredibly soon and agonizingly distant. James mentioned having friends in town, I said. Emily Winters specifically named Officer Reynolds as his connection in the department. David frowned. I'll keep this close held then. Only trusted officers on the arrest team. As I drove to Martha's house to update Jessica, my phone rang an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Patricia Williams, a woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes, this is Rachel Moore. She sounded nervous. James just called me, raging about you confronting him. He's threatening to do something. I don't know what, but he's scary when he gets like this. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Rachel, where are you now? At work. The spa. But I'm off in an hour, and I'm afraid to go home. He might be waiting. I considered my options. Rachel was James's mistress, but she might also be another victim of his manipulation. And right now, she could be an important witness. Meet me at the Sunshine Diner in an hour, I said as Sai said. I want to talk to you. He'll kill me if he finds out, she whispered. I'll make sure he doesn't find out. After hanging up, I called David again to inform him about the development. He agreed to have an officer discreetly watch the diner during our meeting. At Martha's house. I found Jessica looking more like herself. Some color returned to her cheeks. I updated her on the confrontation with James and the pending protective order. He admitted it, she asked, eyes wide. Yes, and threatened both of us. It's all on tape. Jessica shuddered. What happens now? We wait for the arrest warrant, which should come through early next week. I hesitated, then added, Rachel Moore contacted me. I'm meeting her in an hour. Jessica's expression hardened. His mistress, why would you meet with her? She might have valuable information. And she sounds scared of James, too. She helped him cheat on me. Mom, she spent my money. I know, honey, and I'm not excusing that. But right now, we need all the leverage we can get. Jessica sighed, then nodded reluctantly. Just be careful. Both of them could be playing you. It was a valid concern, one I'd already considered, but my instincts told me Rachel's fear was genuine. The Sunshine Diner was half full when I arrived. I chose a booth at the back and ordered coffee while I waited. Rachel arrived 10 minutes later, nervously scanning the restaurant before spotting me. Up close, she looked younger than in the photo's mid-20s, with carefully applied makeup and expensively highlighted blonde hair. She slid into the booth, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you for coming, I said. Rachel nodded, her eyes darting around the diner. I shouldn't be here. If James finds out, he won't, I assured her. Tell me about your relationship with James. She bit her lip. We met at the spa. He came in for a massage about 8 months ago. He was charming, generous. Said his marriage was over in all but name. She looked down. I believed him. 8 months ago, around the same time the abuse of Jessica began. Not a coincidence. When did you move into the lake house? I asked. Rachel's head snapped up. How do you know about that? I'm a police officer. Rachel, I know about the house, the credit cards, all of it. She deflated visibly. 3 months ago, James said it was our special place, that once his divorce was final, we'd live there together. Did you know he was using Jessica's inheritance money to pay for it all? Rachel paled. No, he said it was from his business, that he was doing well, and the credit card in your name, linked to their joint account. He said Jessica never used it anyway. Rachel's voice grew smaller. I knew it was wrong, but he made it seem okay somehow. I studied her carefully. Rachel was another victim of James's manipulation, though of a different kind than Jessica or Emily. Has James ever been violent with you? I asked. She hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve to reveal finger-shaped bruises on her wrist. Last week, I asked about meeting his friends. He said I was getting too clingy. The pattern continued. Rachel, I'm building a case against James for domestic violence and fraud. Your testimony could be valuable. Fear flashed across her face. I can't testify against him. He'd destroy me. He's going to be arrested soon, I told her. We have substantial evidence already. Your testimony would strengthen the case. But we'll proceed either way. Rachel considered this, twisting a napkin between her fingers. What would I have to do? Make a formal statement about your relationship, the financial arrangements, and any abusive behavior you've witnessed or experienced. And then would I have nowhere to go? He controls everything. We can help with that, I assured her. Temporary housing, protective services. Rachel was silent for a long moment. I need to think about it. Don't take too long, I advised. Things are moving quickly now. As Rachel stood to leave, she paused. You should know something. James has a gun. A handgun he keeps in his truck. He's talked about using it if he's ever cornered. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Thank you for telling me. After Rachel left, I immediately called David to relay this new information. We'll include it in the warrant application, he said grimly. Armed and potentially dangerous. That evening, I received confirmation that the emergency protective orders had been granted for both Jessica and me. James was legally prohibited from contacting us or coming within 500 feet of our homes or workplaces. It was a small comfort, knowing that restraining orders were often just paper shields. But it was a necessary step in the legal process. As I prepared for bed that night, I checked all my doors and windows, made sure my service weapon was loaded and accessible, and tried to quiet the nagging voice that said James Anderson wouldn't go down without a fight. Monday couldn't come soon enough. Sunday morning arrived with a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of my home. I sat at my kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee, surrounded by the case files I'd meticulously organized. Each document represented another nail in James Anderson's coffin medical records. Financial statements, property transfers, photos of his affair, testimony from Emily Winters, and the recorded confession from our confrontation at the pawn shop. My phone buzzed with a text from David Rosales. DA reviewing case. Arrest warrant likely tomorrow. Stay vigilant. I replied with a simple thanks and put the phone down, relief mixing with a lingering unease. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see Thomas Alvarez from the county records office shifting nervously on my porch. Tommy, I said, opening the door. What brings you here on a Sunday? His usual friendly demeanor was replaced with obvious worry. Patricia, I had to come in person. Something's happening with those property documents we discussed. I ushered him inside, closing the door firmly behind him. What do you mean? Thomas pulled a folder from his bag. After you left, I kept digging. The forgery was just the beginning. He spread several documents across my table. James didn't just try to remove Jessica's name from the house deed. He's been systematically transferring all your family's assets. I leaned forward, examining the papers. What assets? The Williams family trust, the land your father left to Jessica. My blood ran cold. My father had left 50 acres of prime farmland just outside town to Jessica when he died 5 years ago. The property was worth close to $1 million, held in trust until Jessica turned 30, which would happen next year. How could he access the trust? Jessica is the sole beneficiary, and I'm the trustee. Thomas pointed to a signature at the bottom of a document. According to this, Jessica signed over her beneficiary rights to James 3 months ago, and you, as trustee, approved it. I stared at the signatures, both obvious forgeries. This is impossible, I whispered. The trust documents are in my safe deposit box. Someone created a falsified amendment, Thomas explained, and it was processed through the system without proper verification. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Patricia, I think James has someone high up in the county office helping him. This level of fraud requires inside assistance. I studied the document, noting the notary stamp the same as on the house deed transfer. From Pete's check cashing. Who processed these documents? I asked. Thomas hesitated. Gerald Hoffman. The name hit me like a physical blow. Gerald Hoffman was the county clerk and the brother-in-law of our mayor. If he was involved in James's scheme, this went deeper than I'd imagined. "Tommy, I need copies of everything," I said urgently. "Already done." He handed me the folder. "Be careful, Patricia. If Hoffman is involved, a lot of people will want to protect him, and by extension, James." After Thomas left, I immediately called Michael Ellison. "Michael, we have a bigger problem," I said, explaining what Thomas had discovered. "James wasn't just stealing from their joint accounts. He's trying to steal Jessica's entire inheritance." "This changes things," Michael said gravely. "If Gerald Hoffman is involved, we need to tread carefully. He has powerful connections." "What do you suggest?" "We need to take this higher state level. I have a contact in the Attorney General's office. This kind of corruption falls under their jurisdiction." "How long will that take?" I asked. "I'll call her today, but realistically days, maybe weeks to build a proper case against Hoffman." Weeks we didn't have. James was becoming increasingly desperate, and now I understood why. He wasn't just running from domestic violence charges, he was on the verge of pulling off a massive fraud. "Keep working the legal angle," I told Michael. "But we need to move on James now, before he liquidates Jessica's assets." After hanging up, I drove to Martha's house to check on Jessica and share this new development. I found her in the garden, looking stronger than she had in days. The bruises on her face had faded to yellowish shadows, and she moved with more confidence. "Mom," she said, embracing me. "Dr. Gonzalez called. The ultrasound looks good. The baby's growing normally." I held her tight, momentarily pushing aside the darker news I carried. "That's wonderful, honey." Martha brought us lemonade, and we sat on her patio. Reluctantly, I explained what Thomas had discovered. "He's trying to steal Grandpa's land." Jessica's voice rose in disbelief. "That property has been in our family for generations. The forgeries won't hold up in court," I assured her. "But it shows how far James is willing to go." Jessica shook her head, anger replacing shock. "All those times I asked about our finances, he made me feel stupid, like I couldn't possibly understand business matters." Her hands clenched into fists. "He was stealing from me the entire time." "We'll stop him," I promised. "The arrest warrant should come through tomorrow." "And if it doesn't?" Martha asked, always practical. I didn't have a good answer. The legal system moved at its own pace, and with potential corruption in the county office, delays were possible. My phone rang David Rosellis again. "Patricia, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "Kevin Reynolds just requested the file on your domestic violence case, claiming it's related to an investigation he's working." Officer Reynolds James's childhood friend that Emily had warned me about. "Did you give it to him?" I asked sharply. "Of course not. I told him the case was under my direct supervision." David paused. "But he seemed too interested. I think he's feeding information to James. Can you keep the arrest warrant quiet when it comes through?" "I'll try. But Reynolds has friends in the department. Word gets around." After hanging up, I updated Jessica and Martha on this new complication. "What do we do now?" Jessica asked, fear creeping back into her voice. I thought for a moment. "We need to secure the original trust documents from my safe deposit box. With those, we can prove the amendments are forgeries. The bank won't be open until tomorrow," Martha pointed out. "Then we wait. The protective order is in place, and David has patrols watching both our houses." I squeezed Jessica's hand. "One more day, honey. Then James will be arrested, and this nightmare can start to end." As I prepared to leave, Jessica stopped me at the door. "Mom, be careful. If James is getting desperate enough to forge documents for Grandpa's land, there's no telling what he might do." I hugged her tightly. "I've dealt with dangerous men my entire career. James doesn't scare me." But as I drove home, I couldn't shake a growing sense of foreboding. James Anderson had proven himself to be not just violent, but calculating. He'd spent months planning these financial maneuvers, forging documents, creating fake amendments to the trust, all while maintaining his public persona as a successful businessman. Men like that didn't give up easily. At home, I checked all the windows and doors, made sure my service weapon was loaded, and settled in for a long evening. The folder Thomas had brought sat on my table, a tangible reminder of how high the stakes had become. Around 9 p.m., my doorbell rang again. Cautiously, I approached, gun in hand, and checked the peephole. Rachel Moore stood on my porch, clutching her purse, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I opened the door, keeping one hand near my weapon. "Rachel, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "James is planning something bad." I ushered her inside, locking the door behind her. Rachel perched on the edge of my couch, her eyes darting around the room. "What do you mean, he's planning something?" I asked. "After you confronted him yesterday, he came to the lake house raging. I've never seen him like that." She twisted her hands in her lap. "He was on the phone with someone named Gerald, talking about accelerating the timeline and liquidating assets before Monday. Gerald Hoffman, the county clerk involved in the fraudulent trust amendments." "Did he mention anything specific?" I pressed. Rachel nodded, her voice dropping. "He said if he couldn't have what was his, no one would. That Jessica would regret crossing him." She met my eyes. "And he specifically said you wouldn't be a problem much longer. A threat, plain and simple. Rachel, I need you to make an official statement about what you heard." She shook her head vigorously. "I can't. He'll kill me. He's threatening my daughter and me. This is serious." Rachel bit her lip, conflict evident on her face. "I came to warn you because it's the right thing to do, but I can't testify. I just can't." I realized pushing her would only make her flee. "All right, but will you at least stay somewhere safe tonight? James is dangerous. And if he suspects you came here—" "I'm staying with my sister in Millfield," she said. "He doesn't know where she lives." After giving me her phone number, Rachel left, rejecting my offer to have an officer escort her. I immediately called David to report James's threats. "This changes things," David said grimly. "I'll request an expedited warrant first thing in the morning and post an officer outside your house tonight. What about Jessica? She's at Martha Simmons' house. I'll send someone there too. And Patricia, maybe you should stay somewhere else tonight." I considered his suggestion but dismissed it. "No, if James is looking for me, I want him to find me, not go searching for Jessica." After hanging up, I called Martha to warn her, then Jessica. "Mom, please," Jessica begged. "Stay with us tonight." "I'll be fine," I assured her. "Officer Bradley will be outside, and I have my service weapon." "James is unpredictable when he's angry," she insisted. "He once put his fist through a wall because a delivery was late. All the more reason for me to stay here and draw his attention away from you." After our call, I made a final check of all doors and windows, then positioned myself in the living room with a clear view of both the front door and the driveway. My gun rested on the side table, easily accessible. I didn't expect to sleep much, but I must have dozed off because I woke with a start at 3 a.m. to the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my gun and moved silently through the darkened hallway. Heart pounding, a beam from a flashlight swept across the kitchen floor. A figure in black moved toward the living room where I had been sleeping moments before. "Police freeze," I shouted, gun aimed and steady. The intruder whirled, and I recognized one of James's employees from the pawn shop, one of the twins. He hesitated for a split second, then lunged toward me with something metallic in his hand. I fired once. The man dropped to the floor, clutching his shoulder and howling in pain. I kicked the object away, a hunting knife, and kept my gun trained on him while calling 911. "Shots fired. Officer needs assistance," I reported, giving my address. "Intruder with a weapon." Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. I turned on the lights, keeping my gun pointed at the wounded man. "Who sent you?" I demanded. He glared, refusing to speak. "Let me guess. James Anderson paid you to break in. To what? Intimidate me, hurt me." Still nothing, but his eyes flickered at James's name. "Whatever he's paying you, it's not worth a prison sentence for assaulting a police officer," I said coldly. The front door burst open as David Rosales and 2 officers rushed in, weapons drawn. "Patricia," David exclaimed, taking in the scene. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. He came through the kitchen window." I gestured to the intruder. "One of James's employees from the pawn shop." David knelt beside the man. "Marcus Winters." We've been wanting to talk to you about those stolen goods at the pawn shop. Marcus remained sullenly silent as the officers handcuffed him and called for an ambulance. David pulled me aside while the paramedics worked. What happened? I explained briefly. He was coming for me. James sent him. David's expression hardened. This is attempted assault on a police officer. Between this and the domestic violence case, James is looking at serious time. If we can prove he sent Marcus, I pointed out, we'll search Marcus's phone, check for communications, and now we have probable cause to search James's property and devices, too. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, evidence collection, and crime scene processing. By dawn, Marcus Winters had been transported to the hospital under guard, and my kitchen was filled with investigators. David approached me as I sat at the dining table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. We found text messages on Marcus's phone, he said. James paid him $5,000 to scare you. His words, not mine. Relief washed over me. So we have direct evidence connecting James to the attack. Yes, and the district attorney has approved an arrest warrant for James Anderson on multiple charges: domestic violence, aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit assault on a police officer, fraud, and forgery. When will you arrest him? As soon as we locate him. Officers are already at the pawn shop and his house, but there's no sign of him. A cold dread settled in my stomach. The lake house. That's where he'll be. David nodded. We're sending officers there now. He hesitated. Patricia, you should know. We found a list in Marcus's pocket. It had 3 addresses: yours, Martha Simmons, and Michael Ellison's. My blood ran cold. Jessica. I need to get to Jessica. I've already dispatched additional officers to Martha's house, David assured me. And Michael's being notified. Despite his reassurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that James was still a step ahead of us. As soon as the investigators cleared out, I changed clothes and headed for Martha's house, ignoring David's suggestion that I rest. The drive felt interminable, my hands tight on the steering wheel, scenarios of what James might do playing through my mind. When I finally pulled up to Martha's white Victorian, I was relieved to see a patrol car parked across the street. Martha answered my knock immediately, her face drawn with worry. Patricia, we heard what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, I assured her, stepping inside. Where's Jessica? In the garden. The officer checked the perimeter just 15 minutes ago. I found Jessica sitting on a stone bench beneath an apple tree, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. When she saw me, she jumped up. Mom, thank God you're okay. She embraced me tightly. When Officer Collins told us about the break-in, I was terrified. I held her close, feeling her heart racing against mine. I'm fine, honey, but James is missing, and we think he might try something desperate. Jessica pulled back, her face paling. You think he'll come here? I don't know, but we're not taking any chances. I glanced around the peaceful garden, its beauty at odds with our fear. We need to move you somewhere safer until James is in custody. Where? She asked. He knows all our friends, our family. I considered our options. James was familiar with my house, Martha's, and likely had people watching Michael Ellison's office. We needed somewhere completely unexpected. I have an idea, I said. But first, we need to secure those trust documents. The local bank opened at 9 a.m. With Officer Collins accompanying us, Jessica and I entered as soon as the doors unlocked. The manager, recognizing me as a longtime customer, expedited our access to the safe deposit box. Inside the small metal container were the original Williams family trust documents, exactly as my father had created them, with Jessica as the sole beneficiary and me as trustee until she turned 30. No amendments, no transfers to James Anderson. We need certified copies, I told the manager. It's urgent. While we waited for the copies, my phone rang David Rosales. Patricia, we found James's truck at the lake house, but he's not there. Rachel Moore says she hasn't seen him since yesterday afternoon. Do you believe her? She seemed genuinely surprised when we showed up with an arrest warrant. Said James called her last night, sounding strange, telling her to be ready to leave town. I glanced at Jessica, who was watching me anxiously. "Keep looking, and David checked the airport and bus station. He might be planning to flee." After securing the trust documents, we left the bank with Officer Collins still escorting us. As we approached my car, a silver pickup truck sped past, slowing just enough for me to recognize the driver James's other twin, the brother of the man I'd shot during the break-in. He was watching us. "Get in the car now," I ordered Jessica, pulling her toward the vehicle. Officer Collins, spotting the truck, immediately radioed for backup. "He's following James's orders," I said as we pulled away from the bank. "Keeping tabs on our movements." "Where are we going?" Jessica asked, clutching the folder with the trust documents. "Somewhere James would never think to look." I drove carefully through town, taking random turns to ensure we weren't followed, before heading toward the outskirts to Emily Winter's small apartment above a flower shop. Emily answered the door cautiously, then ushered us inside. "James is looking for us," I explained. "We need a safe place for Jessica until he's arrested." Emily nodded without hesitation. Of course, he'd never expect her to be with me. I left Jessica with Emily and Officer Collins, promising to return as soon as James was in custody. Before leaving, I hugged my daughter tightly. "Stay inside, away from windows," I instructed. "Don't answer the door for anyone but me or David Rosales." "Be careful, Mom," Jessica whispered. "James is cornered now. That makes him more dangerous than ever." I nodded, knowing she was right. As I drove to meet David at the station, I called Michael Ellison to update him on the trust documents. "This is excellent," Michael said. "With the originals, we can prove the amendments are forgeries. I've also spoken with my contact at the Attorney General's office. They're opening an investigation into Gerald Hoffman. That's good news, but our immediate concern is finding James before he hurts someone else." "Agreed." "Where are you headed now?" "The station. We're coordinating the search from there. Be careful. Patricia, men like James don't surrender easily." At the station, the atmosphere was tense. David had assembled a task force of trusted officers to locate James Anderson. A board displayed known associates, properties, and possible hiding places. "We've got APBs out, officers at all transportation hubs, and roadblocks on major highways," David informed me. "He can't get far." "Unless he's already gone," I pointed out. "He's had hours." "True, but his passport is still at his house, and there's no record of him purchasing plane or bus tickets under his name. He could use a fake ID or have someone else buy tickets." David nodded grimly. "We're checking security footage from the airport and bus station. And Patricia..." He hesitated. "We found something at the lake house you should see." He led me to his office, where photographs were spread across his desk. They showed a collection of documents, all relating to the Williams family trust and Jessica's inheritance. James had detailed notes on the trust, the property, and how to access the funds, David explained. "And this," he pointed to a photo of a typed timeline. The final entry, dated today, read "Transfer complete. J.W. and P.W. no longer obstacles." J.W. and P.W., Jessica Williams and Patricia Williams. No longer obstacles had an ominous finality to it. "He's planning something for today," I said, a chill running through me. "We're checking his phone records now to see who he's been in contact with," David assured me. And his office door burst open as Officer Johnson rushed in. "Commander, we just got a call from Emily Winters. James Anderson showed up at her apartment building." My heart stopped. "Jessica." Emily locked herself, Jessica, and Officer Collins in the bathroom and called 911. Johnson continued breathlessly. "James is trying to break down the door." I was already moving. David right behind me. "All available units to Emily Winters' apartment on Maple Street," he shouted to the dispatcher. "Suspect is armed and dangerous." We raced to our vehicles, sirens blaring as we sped through town. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My mind filled with terrible possibilities. How had James found them? Had he been watching Emily all along? The 5-minute drive felt like an eternity. As we approached the flower shop, I could see the patrol car parked outside Officer Collins' vehicle. 2 more police cars had already arrived, officers with weapons drawn surrounding the building. I grabbed my service weapon and approached the senior officer on scene. "What's the situation?" Suspect entered the second-floor apartment approximately 10 minutes ago. We have confirmation that 3 individuals, Emily Winters, Jessica Williams, and Officer Collins, are barricaded in the bathroom. Suspect is attempting to break through the door. Any communication with the suspect? Negative. He's not responding to commands to surrender. I looked up at the second-floor windows. My daughter was up there, terrified, with a violent man trying to reach her. Every instinct screamed at me to rush in, but training held me back. This required a tactical approach. I know the layout, I told the officer. There's a fire escape at the back that leads directly to the bedroom window. David joined us, having coordinated with additional responding units. Patricia, you're too close to this. Let the tactical team handle it. That's my daughter in there, I said firmly. And I know James better than anyone here. I'm going in. After a brief argument, David reluctantly agreed to let me join the entry team but not lead it. We quickly formulated a plan. 2 officers would access the apartment via the fire escape while David and I, along with 2 additional officers, would approach through the front door. On my signal, David instructed, handing me a tactical vest. And Patricia, follow protocol. We take him alive if possible. I nodded, checking my weapon one last time. The approach was silent, our footsteps careful on the creaking wooden stairs leading to Emily's apartment. Through the door, I could hear James shouting, his voice muffled but clearly enraged. You think hiding with my ex will save you? Nobody hides from me. David signaled to the officers at the rear of the building, giving them 30 seconds to get into position. Then he held up 3 fingers, counting down silently. 3, 2, 1. Police, drop your weapon, David shouted as we burst through the door. The scene inside was chaos. The apartment had been ransacked, furniture overturned, pictures smashed. James stood in the hallway, shoulder pressed against the bathroom door, a gun in his hand. When he saw us, he whirled, raising the weapon. Drop it, James, I commanded, my gun trained on his chest. It's over. For a moment, he seemed to consider his options, eyes darting between us and the bathroom door. Then, with a sudden movement, he pointed the gun at the door. You want your daughter, Patricia, what's left of her. I didn't hesitate. I fired once, the bullet striking James in the shoulder. He stumbled backward, the gun falling from his hand. The 2 officers from the fire escape rushed in through the bedroom, securing James before he could recover. Jessica, I called, running to the bathroom door. It's me, it's over. The door opened slowly to reveal Jessica, Emily, and Officer Collins huddled in the small space. Jessica rushed into my arms, sobbing. He found us, she cried. He said he was going to kill us all. I held her tightly, watching over her shoulder as the officers handcuffed a bleeding James Anderson. His eyes met mine, filled with hatred. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, it is, I replied calmly. Domestic violence, assault, attempted murder of a police officer, fraud, forgery. You'll never see the outside of a prison again. As James was led away, I felt Jessica sag against me, the tension finally releasing from her body. Is it really over? She whispered. I stroked her hair, watching the door close behind her abuser. The worst part is, now we rebuild. In the aftermath, statements were taken, evidence collected, and Jessica examined by paramedics. James was transported to the hospital under guard, to be formally arrested once his wound was treated. David found me sitting beside Jessica in an ambulance, a shock blanket around her shoulders. Gerald Hoffman has been brought in for questioning, he informed me. He's already talking, trying to cut a deal. Says James blackmailed him into processing the fraudulent documents. I nodded, too emotionally drained to feel satisfaction. What about the trust? With the original documents and Hoffman's confession, the fraudulent amendments will be invalidated. Jessica's inheritance is safe. Jessica looked up. And the baby? David smiled gently. The paramedics say everything looks good, but they recommend a full checkup with your doctor. As the adrenaline ebbed, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. James had been willing to kill us all, Jessica, Emily, Officer Collins, me rather than face justice for his crimes. How did he find us? I asked David. We're still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests he had a tracking app installed on Jessica's phone. I looked at Jessica's phone, which she clutched in her hand. I changed the SIM card, I said, confusion evident in my voice. These apps are embedded in the device, not the SIM, David explained. He's been tracking her movements all along. Another violation, another form of control. James had been monitoring Jessica even as she tried to escape him. As we prepared to leave the scene, Rachel Moore appeared, pushing through the police barricade to reach us. Is it true? She asked breathlessly. James tried to kill you. I nodded, too exhausted for detailed explanations. Rachel's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I never thought he'd go this far. She turned to Jessica. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I want you to know I'm willing to testify against him. About everything. Jessica regarded her silently for a long moment, then nodded once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the offer. That evening, with James in custody and Jessica safely installed in my home with round-the-clock police protection, I finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened. The break-in at my house, the confrontation at Emily's apartment, the revelation of James's extensive plot to steal Jessica's inheritance. It all painted a picture of a man willing to go to any lengths to maintain control and get what he wanted. As I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, Martha Simmons came by with a casserole and firm instructions to eat something, for heaven's sake. You look exhausted, she observed, settling beside me. It's been a long day, I admitted, but a successful one. That monster is where he belongs. Martha patted my hand. You saved your daughter, Patricia, and your grandchild. The reality of it struck me anew. I was going to be a grandmother. Despite the trauma Jessica had endured, new life was growing, a future beyond James Anderson's shadow. We still have a long road ahead, I said. The trial, Jessica's recovery, rebuilding our lives. One day at a time, Martha advised sagely. Today, you rest. Tomorrow, you fight again. Inside, I could hear Jessica moving about the kitchen, alive and safe. For now, that was enough. The battle had been won, but the war for justice was just beginning. The morning newspapers hit stands with a splash. Local businessman arrested in domestic violence case. James's mugshot stared out from the front page, his expression defiant, despite the bandage on his shoulder. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me as I read the article. Most of it was factually accurate. James Anderson, 32, arrested for domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, and financial fraud. But near the end, a quote from Mayor Richard Thompson caught my attention. While these allegations are serious, we must remember that Mr. Anderson is a respected business owner who has contributed significantly to our community. I urge citizens to withhold judgment until all facts are known. The mayor, Gerald Hoffman's brother-in-law, was already laying groundwork to protect James and, by extension, himself. Jessica joined me, moving more easily now that the worst of her physical injuries had healed. She glanced at the newspaper and grimaced. They make it sound like there's doubt, she said, pouring herself herbal tea. Like maybe he didn't do these things. That's how it starts, I said grimly. The smear campaign. Will people really believe him over us? Over medical evidence and police reports? I wished I could reassure her, but my years in law enforcement had taught me how powerful men often escaped justice. Some will, especially those with financial or political ties to James or the mayor. My phone rang. Michael Ellison. Patricia, have you seen the morning news? Just the newspaper. Why? Turn on Channel 5. I grabbed the remote and switched on the small television in the kitchen. A press conference was underway outside the courthouse. William Valdivia, the high-priced attorney James had retained, stood at a podium surrounded by microphones. My client, James Anderson, is the victim of a vindictive campaign orchestrated by his mother-in-law, Officer Patricia Williams, who has abused her position within the police department to pursue a personal vendetta. Jessica gasped beside me. Mr. Anderson and his wife had marital difficulties, as many couples do, Valdivia continued smoothly. But Officer Williams exploited her daughter's vulnerability to drive a wedge between them, ultimately fabricating evidence to support false allegations. That's a lie, Jessica exclaimed, her face flushing with anger. Valdivia wasn't finished. We have evidence that Officer Williams illegally entered Mr. Anderson's residence, planted documents, and manipulated her daughter into making false statements. We will be filing a formal complaint with the police department and pursuing civil action for defamation. I muted the television, feeling a cold anger settle in my chest. This was predictable, I said to Jessica. He's trying to control the narrative. But how can he say these things? There's so much evidence: the medical reports, the forgeries, Emily's testimony, Rachel's statement, the tracking app on my phone. Evidence gets presented in court, I reminded her. Until then, he can say almost anything to the press, and he's counting on public opinion to pressure the prosecutor into offering a favorable plea deal. My phone rang again, David Rosales this time. I assume you're watching the circus, he asked without preamble. Yes, Valdivia is playing the only card he has attacking my credibility. The chief wants to see you. Internal Affairs is already asking questions about Valdivia's allegations of evidence tampering. I sighed. This, too, was expected. I'll be there in an hour. After hanging up, I explained the situation to Jessica. They have to investigate any allegation of police misconduct. It's procedure. Fear flickered across her face. They can't possibly believe his lies. No, but they have to go through the motions, every I dotted and T crossed. So the case against James is bulletproof. I squeezed her hand. This changes nothing. The evidence is solid. I called Martha, who agreed to stay with Jessica while I went to the station. Before leaving, I checked in with the officer stationed outside our house, part of the protection detail that would remain until James's bail hearing. At the station, the atmosphere was tense. Conversation stopped as I walked through the bullpen, colleagues avoiding my gaze. Only a few, like Officer Bradley, who had been involved in the case from the beginning, offered supportive nods. Chief Warren, a career administrator more concerned with politics than police work, looked uncomfortable as I entered his office. Internal Affairs Lieutenant Peters sat beside his desk, a folder open before him. Patricia, the chief began. You understand why we've called you in? Of course, I said calmly. James Anderson's attorney is making wild accusations to distract from his client's crimes. You're obligated to investigate. Lieutenant Peters cleared his throat. These are serious allegations. Officer Williams, tampering with evidence, abuse of power, filing false reports. All of which are demonstrably false, I countered. Every piece of evidence in this case was collected legally and documented properly. Commander Rosales supervised most of it personally. And your personal involvement with the victim, Peters pressed. Your daughter. I disclosed that relationship from the beginning and followed protocol for cases involving family members. Everything is in the reports. Chief Warren shifted uncomfortably. The mayor has expressed concern about the department's handling of this case. And there it was, the political pressure I'd anticipated. With all due respect, Chief, the mayor's concern should be for a young woman beaten by her husband, not for the man who abused her. Peters frowned. We're not here to debate the merits of the case. Officer Williams, we're investigating procedural compliance. Then investigate, I said firmly. You'll find everything was done by the book. For the next hour, they questioned me about every aspect of the investigation, how evidence was collected, chain of custody, witness statements, the confrontation at Emily's apartment. I answered each question directly, referring to documentation when necessary. Finally, Peters closed his folder. You'll be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. I'd expected this too. I understand. Your service weapon and badge, please, he said, extending his hand. I surrendered both, feeling strangely calm. This was just another of James's tactics, using his connections to try to discredit me, and, by extension, the case against him. As I left the chief's office, David Rosales was waiting in the hallway. This is bull, he said quietly as we walked toward the exit. Everyone knows you did everything by the book. It's procedure, I reminded him. And it actually helps our case. If Internal Affairs clears me, it strengthens the evidence against James. Still, David grumbled. The timing, with his bail hearing tomorrow? That's the point. James is hoping to create enough doubt to get bail. Outside the station, I found my car vandalized liar spray-painted across the driver's side door. David cursed under his breath. I'll get CSU to process this. Don't bother, I said wearily. It's not worth the resources. It's intimidation, Patricia. It's desperation. James is pulling out all the stops because he knows how strong our case is. On the drive home, I noticed a news van parked at the end of my street. Word had gotten out about where Jessica was staying. The officer at our house had already redirected several reporters. Ms. Williams, can we get a statement about your son-in-law's accusations? A reporter called as I parked in the driveway. I ignored them, entering the house to find Jessica and Martha watching the local news with horrified expressions. They're interviewing James's friends from the pawn shop, Jessica said, gesturing to the screen. They're saying I was jealous and controlling, that I made up the abuse because I found out about Rachel. On screen, one of the twins, the brother of Marcus, who had broken into my house, spoke earnestly to a reporter. James is a good guy. Jessica always had a temper, always accusing him of things. He put up with a lot from her. I switched off the television. This is how abusers operate, Jessica. They twist reality, make the victim look crazy or unstable. But people are believing it, she said, her voice breaking. I saw comments online saying I'm just a vindictive wife trying to ruin him. Martha snorted. People will believe anything. What they won't do is look at actual evidence. My phone rang Michael Ellison again. Bad news, he said without preamble. Judge Carson has been assigned to James's bail hearing. My heart sank. Carson was notoriously lenient with domestic violence cases and had golf club connections to the mayor. Can we request a different judge? Not without specific cause for recusal, but I'm working on something that might help. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? I agreed, though leaving Jessica alone with reporters circling felt wrong. Martha, sensing my concern, waved me off. Go, Jessica and I will be fine. Besides, we have Officer Peters outside and a shotgun inside. No one's getting past us. At Michael's office, I found him in conference with a distinguished woman in her 50s, Assistant Attorney General Diane Reynolds. Patricia, this is Diane from the AG's office, Michael introduced us. She's taking a personal interest in our case. Diane shook my hand firmly. The combination of domestic violence, fraud, and apparent corruption in the county clerk's office makes this a state-level concern. What does that mean for tomorrow's bail hearing? I asked. It means I'll be there, Diane said, her tone leaving no doubt about her determination. And I'll be bringing evidence of Gerald Hoffman's involvement in James's scheme. Judge Carson may have local connections, but he won't risk crossing the Attorney General's office. For the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. What about the internal affairs investigation? Michael smiled. Already handled. Diane's office has requested all materials related to the case, including the IA investigation. That puts everything under state jurisdiction, which means local politics have less influence, Diane explained. Chief Warren and Mayor Thompson can bluster all they want, but they can't interfere with a state investigation. Thank you, I said sincerely. James has been working the system from the beginning. It's good to know someone with authority sees through it. Domestic violence cases are personally important to me, Diane said, her expression softening slightly. And when they intersect with public corruption, I make them a priority. We spent the next hour strategizing for the bail hearing. Diane was confident James would be denied bail given the serious nature of the charges and the flight risk he presented. The forged trust documents show clear intent to liquidate assets and flee, she noted. No judge, not even Carson, can ignore that. As I prepared to leave, Michael walked me to the door. Patricia, there's something else you should know. The twins, Marcus and Matthew Winters, have extensive criminal records, mostly petty theft and drug charges. But they've never spent significant time in jail. Let me guess their cases were always heard by Judge Carson. Michael nodded. And they were always represented by William Valdivia, despite having no visible means to pay his fees. So Carson, Valdivia, and the twins have a long-standing arrangement. I connected the dots. And now James is benefiting from it. Exactly. Diane's office is looking into all of it. On the drive home, I felt cautiously optimistic. James had connections and was fighting dirty. But we now had the state attorney general's office on our side. The balance was shifting, but when I arrived home, I found Jessica in tears, Martha trying unsuccessfully to comfort her. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to my daughter's side. Jessica wordlessly handed me her phone, open to a local news website. The headline read, "Exclusive Jessica Anderson's secret lover speaks out." The article featured an interview with a man claiming to be Jessica's ex-boyfriend, alleging they had been having an affair throughout her marriage to James. The evidence was a series of edited text messages and photos of Jessica with a male colleague from her accounting job. "This is Kevin," Jessica said, pointing to the photo. "My coworker. We worked on projects together, but we were never involved. James was always jealous of him." I scrolled through the article, my anger building. "These texts are completely out of context, and some of them don't even sound like you." "Because I never sent them," Jessica cried. "James must have fabricated them somehow." Martha, who had been quietly fuming, spoke up. "He's trying to destroy her reputation before the bail hearing, make the judge think she's an unreliable witness." I pulled Jessica into a hug, feeling her body shake with sobs. "We'll fight this, honey. We have the truth on our side." "But what if it's not enough?" she whispered against my shoulder. "What if he gets out on bail tomorrow? What if he comes after us again?" I had no easy answers. James was proving to be a formidable opponent, using every dirty trick to undermine our case. The bail hearing tomorrow would be our first real test, a preview of the larger battle to come. As darkness fell, I checked in with the officer outside, reinforced our home security, and tried to reassure Jessica that justice would prevail. But privately, I shared her fears. James Anderson had shown himself willing to commit violence, forge documents, manipulate the media, and use his political connections to escape consequences. Tomorrow would determine whether the system protected victims or perpetrators, and I wasn't sure I trusted it to make the right choice. As we made our way back through the courthouse lobby, we were confronted by a wall of reporters shoving microphones toward us. "Mrs. Anderson, what's your response to the allegations of infidelity? Officer Williams, will you address claims that you manipulated evidence? Is it true the Attorney General's office is only involved because of your political connections?" Michael stepped forward protectively. "No questions at this time. My clients are pleased with today's ruling and look forward to the full truth emerging at trial." We pushed through the crowd toward the exit, where Officer Bradley waited with our car. As we approached, I noticed Rachel Moore standing apart from the reporters, watching us uncertainly. "Wait," Jessica said, surprising me by stopping. "I want to talk to her." "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. Jessica nodded, and we made our way to where Rachel stood, fidgeting nervously with her purse strap. "Thank you for agreeing to testify," Jessica said, her voice controlled but not hostile. "It couldn't have been easy." Rachel looked stunned by the acknowledgement. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never thought James would—" She trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. "I was blind. Stupid." "You weren't the only one," Jessica replied softly. "He's very good at making people see what he wants them to see." "I'm leaving town," Rachel confessed. "After the trial, there's nothing for me here anymore." Jessica nodded, not offering false comfort or forgiveness, but acknowledging the decision with respect. It was more generosity than most would show to their husband's mistress. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright after the dimness of the courthouse. As we drove home, Jessica seemed lost in thought, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. "I think so," she said after a moment. "Seeing James in custody, knowing he can't hurt us right now. It helps." She gazed out the window. "But I keep thinking about what he said. This isn't over. He doesn't give up easily." "No, he doesn't," I agreed. "But neither do we. And we have the truth on our side." At home, Martha was waiting with lunch and eager for news of the hearing. "Bail denied," she crowed when we told her. "That'll wipe the smug smile off his face." Jessica managed a small smile at Martha's enthusiasm. "It's just the beginning, though the trial could be months away." "Then we use that time," I said firmly. "We keep building our case, gathering evidence, preparing witnesses. And healing, Martha added, giving Jessica a pointed look. That baby needs a strong, healthy mother. As if on cue, Jessica's phone rang Doctors Maria Gonzalez calling to check on her and schedule a prenatal appointment. Tomorrow at 2. Yes, that works, Jessica confirmed, looking more animated than she had in days. And Dr. Gonzalez, thank you for everything. After lunch, Michael called with news. The Attorney General's office has officially taken over the prosecution of the financial fraud aspects of the case. They're also investigating Judge Carson's connections to William Valdivia. That's excellent news, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. What about the domestic violence charges? Elena Martinez will continue to lead on those, but with the AG's office support, they're building a solid RICO case against James, Gerald Hoffman, and possibly others for conspiracy and fraud. RICO, I asked, surprised. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act was typically used against organized crime. Diane believes James's pawn shop was laundering money and operating as a loan shark operation. The notebooks you found with interest rates and client initials, they're cross-referencing those with foreclosures in the county. It looks like James was targeting vulnerable homeowners, lending at exorbitant rates, then taking their property when they couldn't pay. I thought of the lake house and Jessica's inheritance. So Jessica wasn't his only victim. Not by a long shot, and with Gerald Hoffman helping process fraudulent property transfers, they had quite an operation going. After hanging up, I shared the news with Jessica, whose eyes widened in shock. All this time, she whispered. I thought it was just about me, about controlling me. It was, I assured her. But James is a predator on multiple levels. He saw your inheritance as another opportunity to exploit. How did I not see who he really was? The question that had haunted her since that first night she collapsed at my door. Because he didn't want you to, I said gently. Abusers are master manipulators. They show you what they want you to see until they have control. That evening, we received a surprise visit from David Rosales, who arrived with news from Internal Affairs. You've been cleared of all allegations, he announced with satisfaction. Lieutenant Peters found no evidence of procedural violations or tampering. You'll be reinstated tomorrow. Relief washed over me. That was fast. The AG's involvement expedited things, David explained. Plus, Peters is one of the good ones. He wasn't about to let James Anderson's smear campaign succeed. What about Officer Reynolds? I asked, remembering the cop who had been feeding information to James. David's expression darkened. Under investigation for multiple violations, we found evidence he was taking payoffs not just from James, but from several local business owners. He's been suspended pending criminal charges. The web of corruption surrounding James was unraveling quickly. I wondered how many others would be caught in it before the investigation concluded. Later that night, as Jessica slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, I sat on my porch, watching the stars and reflecting on how quickly our lives had changed. Just 8 days ago, my daughter had appeared at my door, bruised and terrified. Now her abuser was in custody. A major fraud investigation was underway, and Jessica was beginning to heal both physically and emotionally. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The trial would force Jessica to relive her trauma in excruciating detail, while James and his attorney would do everything possible to discredit her. The road to justice was never smooth, especially for victims of domestic violence. I made a silent vow to the night sky James Anderson would never hurt my daughter again. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifices were required, I would see this through to the end. 3 weeks passed with relative calm. James remained in custody, his attempts to secure bail repeatedly denied as more evidence of financial crimes emerged. Jessica's physical wounds had healed completely, though she still startled at sudden noises and had nightmares that left her gasping for breath. I had returned to work, though Chief Warren kept me on desk duty allegedly until the case against James was resolved, but more likely to appease the mayor. I didn't mind. It gave me more time to focus on Jessica and the upcoming trial. Today was a milestone, Jessica's 12-week prenatal appointment, where she would hear the baby's heartbeat for the first time. I took the morning off to accompany her to Dr. Gonzalez's office. In the small examination room, Jessica lay on the table, her slight baby bump visible beneath her blouse. Dr. Gonzalez spread gel on her abdomen and moved the Doppler device in slow circles. Suddenly, a rapid whooshing sound filled the room, the baby's heartbeat, strong and fast. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "That's really my baby, Doctor," Gonzalez smiled. "Yes, and a healthy one at that. Heart rate is perfect at 160 beats per minute." I squeezed Jessica's hand, my own eyes misting over. In the midst of all the darkness, this new life was a reminder that hope persisted. "Do you want to know the sex?" Dr. Gonzalez asked. Jessica hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it's a girl, my granddaughter." Jessica broke into a radiant smile, the first genuine one I'd seen since before that terrible night. "A daughter," she whispered, then looked at me. "Mom, I'm having a little girl. She's going to be amazing," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Just like her mother. Later, as we left the clinic, Jessica seemed lighter, more present than she had been in weeks. "I want to start getting things ready," she said. "A nursery, clothes, everything she'll need." "Of course," I agreed, relieved to see her looking toward the future. "Where do you want to start?" "I need to find a place of my own," she said decisively. "I can't keep living with you forever. And I don't want to go back to that house." The house she had shared with James remained empty, a crime scene still being processed by investigators. Even if it were available, I understood why she couldn't return there. "We'll find you somewhere perfect," I promised. "Somewhere you can make a fresh start with your daughter." Over lunch at a small cafe, Jessica began to sketch plans for her future. "I want to go back to work," she said. "My maternity leave from the accounting firm ends next month. I spoke with Mr. Friedman yesterday, and he's holding my position." "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked, concerned about the stress of returning to work while preparing for the trial. "I need normal, Mom. I need to feel like myself again, not just James's victim or a witness in a criminal case." She set down her fork, expression determined. "I can't let him take my whole life from me." I nodded, proud of her resilience. "Then we'll make it work. I can adjust my schedule to help with appointments and preparation for the trial." "Speaking of the trial," Jessica began hesitantly, "Michael says James is still refusing plea offers. He wants his day in court. That's not surprising. Men like James believe they can charm or manipulate their way out of anything. Michael also says William Valdivia has a reputation for vicious cross-examinations, that he'll try to make me look unstable, vindictive, unfaithful, anything to create reasonable doubt." I reached across the table to take her hand. "That's his job, but you have something stronger than Valdivia's tactics, the truth, and evidence to support it." Jessica nodded, but worry still clouded her eyes. "I just keep thinking about sitting on that witness stand, with James staring at me, while his lawyer tries to twist everything I say." "You won't be alone," I assured her. "I'll be right there. And remember, every witness Valdivia calls, Elena Martinez gets to cross-examine. Every lie they tell, she can expose." That afternoon, we met with Michael Ellison and Elena Martinez to discuss trial preparation. Michael's office was warm and welcoming, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the harsh fluorescence of the courthouse. "The good news," Elena began, "is that the case against James is stronger than ever. Gerald Hoffman has agreed to testify against him in exchange for leniency. He's provided details about their arrangement to process fraudulent property transfers." "What about the twins, Marcus and Matthew?" I asked. "Marcus is facing charges for breaking into your home. He's not talking yet, but his brother Matthew approached us yesterday, looking for a deal." "And Rachel Moore?" Jessica asked. "She's been fully cooperative. Her testimony about James's controlling behavior and financial manipulation will help establish a pattern consistent with your experience." Michael opened a folder. "There's also the matter of the divorce. James is contesting it, of course, but given the circumstances, we should have no trouble securing a dissolution on grounds of cruelty. More importantly, we're filing for full custody of your daughter, with no visitation rights for James." Jessica tensed. "Can we do that even if he goes to prison? Won't he still have parental rights?" Typically, yes, Elena acknowledged. But with domestic violence convictions, especially violence that endangered the unborn child, we have strong grounds to terminate his rights completely. I don't want him anywhere near my daughter, Jessica said firmly. Ever. We'll do everything possible to ensure that. Michael promised. Now let's talk about your testimony. For the next 2 hours, they prepared Jessica for what to expect on the witness stand, the questions Elena would ask, the likely attacks from Valdivia, how to remain calm and focused under pressure. Remember, Elena advised, Valdivia wants you to get emotional, to appear unstable or vengeful. Your job is to tell your truth clearly and factually, without letting him provoke you. Jessica listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. I could see her gathering her strength, preparing herself for the battle ahead. As we were leaving, Michael pulled me aside. Patricia, there's something you should know. The Attorney General's investigation has uncovered evidence that James may have been involved in more serious crimes than we initially thought. What kind of crimes? I asked, immediately concerned. Possible connections to organized crime in the next county. His pawn shop appears to have been used for money laundering. Diane Reynolds is pursuing it separately, but it could impact our case if James decides to cooperate against bigger fish to reduce his own exposure. You think he might get a deal? The thought of James escaping full justice made my blood run cold. It's possible, but unlikely given the domestic violence charges. Diane is firmly on our side there. She won't let him walk on the assault charges, no matter what he offers on the financial crimes. This reassured me somewhat, though the idea that James might receive any leniency remained troubling. On the drive home, Jessica was quiet, processing everything we'd learned. Finally, she spoke. I've been thinking about names for the baby, I smiled, grateful for the change of subject. Any ideas? I was thinking Hope. She placed a hand on her stomach. Because that's what she is to me. Hope for a better future. Hope Williams, I said, testing it out. It's perfect. Actually, Jessica said hesitantly, I'm changing my name back to Williams. I don't want anything of his, including his last name. Of course, I agreed. You're a Williams through and through, and so is Hope. That weekend, Jessica and I began apartment hunting. After viewing several possibilities, we found a small 2-bedroom in a secure building with good natural light and a community garden perfect for a new mother and her baby. The landlord, a friend of Martha's, was willing to offer a 6-month lease with option to renew, giving Jessica flexibility as she rebuilt her life. This is the one, Jessica declared as we stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows. I can see Hope taking her first steps right here. We signed the lease that day, with Jessica able to move in the following week. It felt like a significant step forward, Jessica reclaiming her independence, creating a new home untainted by painful memories. Back at my house, Jessica began sorting through the belongings Martha had retrieved from her former home, deciding what to keep and what to discard. I don't want any of the furniture, she said firmly. Too many memories. We'll get you new things, I assured her. A fresh start deserves fresh surroundings. She nodded, then hesitated before opening a small wooden box. Grandma's jewelry, she explained, lifting out a delicate pearl necklace. I was so afraid James had sold it when I couldn't find it that night. Martha said it was hidden in the back of your closet, just where you told me to look. Jessica clasped the necklace around her throat, touching the pearls reverently. Mom, will you keep the trust documents in your safe deposit box? I don't want to risk anything happening to them before the trial. Of course, and afterward, we can talk about setting up a new trust for Hope. Jessica smiled at the mention of her daughter's name. I'd like that. Something to secure her future. No matter what happens. The phrase, no matter what happens, hung in the air between us, a reminder that despite our progress, uncertainties remained. James was still fighting the charges. The trial loomed ahead, and even with a conviction, there would be appeals, parole hearings, the ongoing threat that he might someday return to our lives. But looking at Jessica, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly, her grandmother's pearls at her throat. Determination in her eyes, I knew we would face whatever came next with the same strength that had brought us this far. That night, as we sat on my porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Jessica asked the question that had been on her mind since the doctor's appointment. "Mom, what if Hope looks like him? What if every time I look at her, I see James?" I considered my answer carefully. "When you were born, everyone said you looked exactly like your father. Same eyes, same chin, same expressions, but as you grew, all I ever saw was you, my beautiful, unique daughter, not a reflection of anyone else, just entirely yourself." Jessica absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I already love her so much. I just don't want anything to taint that love." "Nothing will," I promised. "From the moment you hold her, she'll be only herself to you, Hope Williams, your daughter, not James's anything." Jessica leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely. For this moment, at least, there was peace, a small island of calm before the storm of the trial. The weeks leading up to the trial passed in a blur of preparation. Jessica moved into her new apartment, returned to work part-time, and continued therapy sessions with Dr. Anna Quiroga to help her process her traumas. I split my time between desk duty at the station, helping Jessica prepare for her testimony, and consulting with Elena Martinez about trial strategy. James remained in custody, though not without continuing to cause trouble. Through Valdivia, he filed complaints about his treatment in jail, demanded special medical attention for his shoulder, and attempted to contact Jessica through intermediaries, all efforts to maintain some level of control despite his incarceration. Each attempt was documented and added to the growing case file. Every manipulative tactic became further evidence of his true character. 3 months after that fateful night when Jessica collapsed at my door, the trial of James Anderson began. The courthouse was packed with spectators and media, drawn by the sensational combination of domestic violence, financial fraud, and potential political corruption. Jessica and I arrived early, accompanied by Martha, who had become a steadfast supporter throughout the ordeal. Now 5 months pregnant, Jessica's baby bump was clearly visible beneath her conservative navy dress. She had chosen to embrace her pregnancy rather than hide it, a silent rebuke to James's defense team, who had suggested in pre-trial motions that the paternity of the child was in question. William Valdivia sat at the defense table, reviewing notes with 2 junior attorneys. James, dressed in a suit rather than prison garb, looked polished and professional, the image of a respectable businessman wrongfully accused. When Jessica entered, his eyes followed her, focusing briefly on her stomach before looking away with a dismissive expression. Elena Martinez greeted us warmly. "Ready?" she asked Jessica. "As I'll ever be," Jessica replied, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. We took our seats behind the prosecution table as Judge Amelia Santos entered the courtroom. Unlike Judge Carson, Santos had a reputation for fairness and a no-nonsense approach to domestic violence cases. Her assignment to the trial was another small victory. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Superior Court of the State is now in session, the Honorable Judge Amelia Santos presiding." After the formalities, Elena Martinez rose for her opening statement. She moved to the center of the courtroom, facing the jury, 8 women and 4 men from diverse backgrounds. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Elena began, her voice clear and measured. "This case is about power and control. It's about a man, James Anderson, who systematically isolated, abused, and terrorized his wife, Jessica Williams, while simultaneously defrauding her of her inheritance and plotting to leave her destitute." She walked slowly before the jury box, making eye contact with each member. "You will hear testimony from medical professionals who treated Ms. Williams' injuries: a split lip, black eye, and abdominal bruising so severe it threatened the life of her unborn child. You will see photographs of these injuries, taken at the hospital the night she finally escaped her abuser." Elena continued, outlining the evidence against James, the medical reports, the forged documents, the testimony from Emily Winters and Rachel Moore establishing a pattern of abuse, the recorded threats during our confrontation at the pawn shop, the break-in at my home, and the attack at Emily's apartment. "By the end of this trial," Elena concluded, You will have no doubt that James Anderson is guilty of every charge against him. You will see beyond the respectable facade to the true man beneath violent, controlling, and dangerous. And you will deliver the justice that Jessica Williams and her unborn daughter deserve." She returned to her seat as William Valdivia rose for the defense's opening statement. He buttoned his expensive suit jacket and approached the jury with an expression of grave concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, what Miss Martinez has presented is a carefully constructed narrative designed to vilify my client. But narratives are not evidence, and this one has been crafted by a vengeful mother-in-law who happens to be a police officer with unusual influence in this community." Valdivia paced deliberately, his tone sympathetic yet authoritative. "James Anderson is not the monster the prosecution describes. He is a successful businessman who found himself trapped in a troubled marriage with a jealous, unstable wife. Yes, there was an altercation the night Miss Williams fled to her mother's house, but it was precipitated by his discovery of her infidelity, not some systematic campaign of abuse. I felt Jessica stiffen beside me at the baseless accusation. I squeezed her hand reassuringly as Valdivia continued his character assassination disguised as legal argument. "As for the financials matters," he went on, "they were routine transactions that have been twisted into something sinister. The prosecution has constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory involving county officials and business associates, all to distract from the simple truth. This case is about a family dispute that has been criminalized by an overzealous police officer determined to destroy her son-in-law." Valdivia returned to his seat, having planted seeds of doubt that Elena would need to systematically uproot. The prosecution's case began with Dr. Maria Gonzalez, who testified about Jessica's injuries the night she came to the emergency room. Photographs were entered into evidence, the stark images of Jessica's bruised face and abdomen projected on a screen for the jury to see. "In your professional opinion, Dr. Gonzalez," Elena asked, "were these injuries consistent with a fall, as the defense has suggested?" "No," Dr. Gonzalez replied firmly. "The pattern of bruising, particularly the finger marks on the wrists and shoulders, are consistent with assault, not accidental injury. And the abdominal bruising, indicative of multiple direct blows to the abdomen. Given that Ms. Williams was approximately 6 weeks pregnant at the time, these blows posed a significant risk to the fetus." Valdivia's cross-examination attempted to suggest alternative explanations for the injuries, but Dr. Gonzalez remained steadfast in her assessment, her medical expertise leaving little room for doubt. The next witness was Emily Winters, who testified about her relationship with James and the abuse she had suffered. Despite aggressive questioning from Valdivia, who attempted to portray her as a scorned ex-girlfriend seeking revenge, Emily remained composed, her testimony damning in its consistency with Jessica's experience. "He would apologize after hitting me," Emily explained. "Buy me gifts, promise it would never happen again. Then something would trigger him a text from a male friend, dinner not being ready when he wanted, and the cycle would start over." "And why did you eventually leave Mr. Anderson?" Elena asked. Emily touched the scar along her jawline. "The last time, he threw me into a glass coffee table. 27 stitches. I knew the next time might kill me." On the second day of the trial, Rachel Moore took the stand, dressed conservatively and visibly nervous. She nevertheless provided compelling testimony about James's controlling behavior, his financial deceptions, and his growing anger as his schemes began to unravel. "He became obsessed with the land Jessica's inheritance," Rachel testified. "Said once it was transferred, we could leave town, start over somewhere else. When I asked about Jessica, he said—" She hesitated, glancing at Jessica apologetically before continuing. "He said she wouldn't be a problem much longer." "Did you understand this as a threat?" Elena asked. "At the time, I thought he meant the divorce would be finalized. But after he attacked her, I realized he had something more permanent in mind." Valdivia's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to portray Rachel as a gold digger who had knowingly pursued a married man for financial gain. Rachel admitted her mistakes, but refused to back down from her testimony about James's threats and manipulations. Day 3 brought testimony from county officials, including Gerald Hoffman, who detailed his role in processing fraudulent property transfers at James's direction. The jury learned how James had systematically attempted to steal Jessica's inheritance through forgery and manipulation of public records. Mr. Anderson provided the forged documents, Hoffman testified, visibly uncomfortable. He said his wife had signed them willingly but couldn't come to the office in person. I knew it was wrong, but he threatened to expose some indiscretions in my past if I didn't cooperate. Financial experts testified about the tangled web of transactions James had orchestrated, moving money from joint accounts to shell companies, and ultimately to the purchase of the lake house titled solely in his name. Thomas Alvarez explained how he had discovered the fraudulent trust amendments and alerted me to the scheme. The signatures were obvious forgeries, he testified. Nothing like the originals on file. Throughout it all, James sat impassively at the defense table, occasionally whispering to Valdivia but otherwise showing no reaction to the damning testimony. His eyes frequently drifted to Jessica, his expression unreadable. On the fourth day, David Rosales testified about the law enforcement aspects of the case, the break-in at my home, the confrontation at Emily's apartment, and the evidence linking James to both events. Marcus Winters, one of Mr. Anderson's employees, was apprehended inside Officer Williams' home with a hunting knife, David explained. Text messages on his phone confirmed Mr. Anderson had paid him $5,000 to scare Officer Williams. And the incident at Emily Winters' apartment, Elena prompted. Mr. Anderson tracked Jessica Williams to that location using spyware installed on her phone. He attempted to break down the bathroom door where Ms. Williams, Miss Winters, and Officer Collins had barricaded themselves. When police arrived, he pointed a weapon at the bathroom door and threatened to shoot. Day 5 arrived the day Jessica would testify. She had been prepared thoroughly, but nothing could fully ready her for the experience of facing her abuser in court while detailing the most traumatic moments of her life. I watched with pride and concern as Jessica took the stand, swore her oath, and sat facing the courtroom. At 5 months pregnant, she embodied both vulnerability and strength, a living testament to survival and hope for the future. Elena approached gently. Ms. Williams, could you please tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant, James Anderson? Jessica took a deep breath and began her story: the courtship, the early marriage, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the increasing control over her movements and finances, and finally, the escalation to physical violence. The first time he hit me was after a dinner party with his business associates, she recounted. I had disagreed with something he said about local politics. It wasn't even important. But when we got home, he slapped me across the face, said I had embarrassed him. What happened after that? Elena asked. He cried, apologized, brought me flowers the next day, said it would never happen again. Jessica's voice remained steady. But it did happen again, and again, each time worse than the last. She described the night she had finally fled to my house, the discovery of money missing from their joint account, her confrontation with James, his rage when she questioned him. He punched me in the stomach, she said, her hand instinctively moving to protect her now visible baby bump. I didn't know I was pregnant then, but he knew I might be. We had been trying for a baby. He punched me deliberately, multiple times. Elena guided her through the rest of the timeline: the medical examination, the discovery of the pregnancy, the threatened miscarriage, the forged documents, the tracking software on her phone, and the final confrontation at Emily's apartment. Throughout her testimony, Jessica remained composed, her voice occasionally faltering but never breaking. She answered each question clearly and directly, her gaze steady even when it briefly met James's across the courtroom. When Elena finished, Judge Santos called for a lunch recess before Valdivia's cross-examination. Jessica exhaled shakily as she stepped down from the witness stand. You did beautifully, I told her as we left the courtroom. Just like we practiced. The hard part's still coming, she replied, tension evident in her voice. Valdivia is going to try to tear me apart this afternoon. Remember what Elena said: just tell your truth. Don't let him provoke you or put words in your mouth. We had a quiet lunch in a small conference room provided by the court, Jessica barely touching her food despite my encouragement to keep up her strength for the baby's sake. What if the jury believes him? she asked suddenly. What if they think I'm making it all up? The evidence supports everything you've said, I reminded her. Medical reports, photographs, witness testimony, financial records, the tracking software on your phone, it all corroborates your account. She nodded, but worry still clouded her eyes. James can be so convincing when he wants to be. You've seen how he's charmed people for years. The jury has seen the real James Anderson through witness after witness, I assured her. Your testimony is the final piece that brings it all together. When court resumed, Jessica returned to the witness stand, her shoulders squared despite her obvious anxiety. William Valdivia approached with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Williams, he began, deliberately using her maiden name rather than Mrs. Anderson as he had in previous court filings. You've provided quite a dramatic account of your marriage, but I'd like to explore some inconsistencies. If I may, what followed was a methodical attempt to undermine Jessica's credibility, portraying her as emotionally unstable, financially motivated, and unfaithful, precisely the character assassination we had anticipated. Isn't it true that you began questioning the joint account only after learning about my client's relationship with Ms. Moore? Valdivia asked. No, Jessica replied calmly. I had concerns about missing funds for months before that. James always dismissed my questions, said I wouldn't understand business matters. And yet you're an accountant by profession, Valdivia noted with exaggerated surprise. Surely you could understand basic financial transactions. Yes, which is why I knew something was wrong. But James controlled all the passwords and online access. He became angry whenever I asked to see statements. Valdivia pivoted smoothly. Let's talk about Kevin Reynolds, your colleague at the accounting firm. Isn't it true that you and Mr. Reynolds had a relationship beyond professional boundaries? No, Jessica stated firmly. Kevin is a coworker and friend, nothing more. Then how do you explain these text messages? Valdivia produced copies of the alleged texts that had appeared in the news article before the bail hearing. Jessica examined them briefly. These are manipulated. Some I never sent at all. Others have been edited to remove context. Convenient, Valdivia remarked, but Elena's objection to the editorializing was sustained. For nearly 2 hours, Valdivia attempted to twist Jessica's words, suggest alternative explanations for her injuries, imply financial motives for her accusations, and paint her as an unfaithful wife seeking revenge on a husband who had strayed. Through it all, Jessica remained remarkably poised, her responses clear and consistent. When Valdivia finally concluded his cross-examination, there was a palpable sense of respect in the courtroom for her dignity under fire. Elena's redirect was brief but effective, allowing Jessica to clarify points Valdivia had deliberately muddied and reinforce the key elements of her testimony. As Jessica stepped down from the witness stand for the final time, her eyes met mine. I nodded slightly, hoping she could see the pride and love I felt in that moment. She had faced her abuser and his attack dog of an attorney with unwavering courage, telling her truth despite their best efforts to silence or discredit her. The prosecution rested its case, and court adjourned for the day. Tomorrow, the defense would begin presenting its case, James Anderson's version of events, supported by whatever witnesses Valdivia had managed to assemble, but for now, Jessica had completed her part in the process. As we left the courthouse, she exhaled deeply, as if releasing a burden she had carried for months. It's done, she said quietly. Whatever happens now, I've told my truth. He can't take that away from me. I put my arm around her shoulders, guiding her through the crowd of reporters and onlookers. You were magnificent, Jessica. Truly magnificent. For the first time since the trial began, she smiled a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Hope was kicking the whole time I was on the stand. It felt like she was cheering me on. She was, I said, placing my hand briefly on her stomach. Her brave mother, fighting for both of them. As we drove home in the fading light, I knew the battle wasn't over. James would testify, attempting to charm the jury just as he had charmed so many others. Valdivia would present alternative narratives, call character witnesses, try to create reasonable doubt. But watching Jessica, now her head high, One hand resting protectively on her growing daughter, I felt a certainty that justice would prevail. The truth had been spoken, evidence presented, lies exposed. James Anderson's power over Jessica was broken. No matter what happened next, she had already won the most important victory: her freedom from fear, her reclamation of her own voice and future. The rest was in the hands of 12 jurors, and, ultimately, the justice system we had both sworn to uphold. The defense began its case the following morning. William Valdivia called a series of character witnesses, business associates, neighbors, and acquaintances who testified to James's public persona as a respected businessman and generous community member. "James always seemed like the perfect husband," said Linda Pearson, a neighbor. "Always opening the car door for Jessica, bringing her flowers. I never saw any signs of trouble." On cross-examination, Elena Martinez was methodical. "Mrs. Pearson, have you ever been inside the Anderson home?" "Well, no. Just their backyard for a barbecue once." "So your observations were limited to public behavior?" "Correct." "Yes, I suppose so. Are you aware that domestic abusers often maintain a flawless public image while behaving very differently in private?" Valdivia objected, but the point was made. One by one, Elena dismantled the testimony of character witnesses who knew only the carefully crafted facade James presented to the world. When Matthew Winters took the stand to claim that James had been with him the night Jessica was injured, Elena produced cell tower records showing James's phone at his home address during the time in question. "Are you willing to risk perjury charges to protect Mr. Anderson?" she asked bluntly. Matthew's confident demeanor crumbled. "I might be mistaken about the exact date." The most surprising witness came on the third day of the defense's case: Kevin Reynolds, Jessica's co-worker, whom Valdivia had tried to portray as her lover. "Mr. Reynolds," Valdivia began, "what was the nature of your relationship with Jessica Anderson?" Kevin, a serious young man in wire-rimmed glasses, looked uncomfortable. "We were colleagues who worked on several projects together. Nothing more." Valdivia produced printed text messages. "Are you familiar with these exchanges between you and Mrs. Anderson?" Kevin examined them. "Some of these are genuine work-related texts, but others have been altered or fabricated entirely." Valdivia's expression tightened. This was clearly not the testimony he had expected. "Mr. Reynolds, did you meet with the prosecution before testifying today?" "No," Kevin replied. "But I did speak with the digital forensics expert they consulted. He confirmed what I already knew: these messages were manipulated." Elena's cross-examination was brief and devastating. "Mr. Reynolds, to your knowledge, did James Anderson ever express concern or jealousy regarding your professional relationship with his wife?" "Yes," Kevin confirmed. "He called our office multiple times when Jessica and I were working late on the Miller audit. He once showed up and made a scene in front of our entire team, accusing her of inappropriate behavior." "And was there any truth to those accusations?" "None whatsoever. We were meeting a tax deadline with 15 other colleagues present." Finally, on the fourth day of the defense's case, James Anderson himself took the stand. Dressed in a conservative suit, his expression appropriately solemn, he presented the picture of a wrongfully accused man. "Mr. Anderson," Valdivia began, "did you physically assault your wife on the night of April 15th? "Absolutely not," James replied, his voice steady. "Jessica and I argued about finances. Yes, she had discovered my indiscretion with Rachel Moore and was understandably upset. But I never laid a hand on her." "How do you explain her injuries?" James sighed, as if pained by the memory. "Jessica has always been emotional. When she discovered the text messages between Rachel and me, she became hysterical. She threw things, tripped over the coffee table, fell against the doorframe. I tried to help her, but she pushed me away and ran out." "And the allegations of financial fraud?" "A misunderstanding," James insisted. "Jessica signed those property transfers willingly. She knew about the lake house. It was meant to be a surprise anniversary gift. But her mother has always disliked me, always thought Jessica could do better." Officer Williams saw an opportunity to turn a marital dispute into criminal charges. Throughout his testimony, James maintained this narrative that he was the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law with a badge and the authority to orchestrate a false case against him. When Elena Martinez rose for cross-examination, her approach was methodical rather than aggressive. Mr. Anderson, you claim Jessica's injuries resulted from a fall. How do you explain the medical examiner's testimony that the bruising patterns were consistent with directed blows, not accidental injury? Doctors can be mistaken, James replied smoothly. And with all due respect, Dr. Gonzalez is a friend of the Williams family. What about Emily Winters? Was she also mistaken about the injuries you inflicted on her? James's composure slipped slightly. Emily was unstable. She fabricated those allegations when I ended our relationship. And Rachel Moore, was she also lying about your controlling behavior and threats? Rachel is bitter because I reconciled with my wife briefly after our affair. Marcus Winters testified that you paid him to break into Officer Williams' home. Was he lying as well? James hesitated. Marcus misunderstood my instructions. I asked him to deliver a letter to Patricia, explaining my side of the story. With a hunting knife at 3 a.m., Elena asked incredulously. For hours, Elena methodically exposed the contradictions in James's testimony, confronting him with evidence that directly refuted his claims. James maintained his composure initially, but as the questioning continued, cracks began to appear in his facade. Mr. Anderson, Elena said, her voice deceptively gentle. If Jessica's injuries were accidental as you claim, why did you text her? Open your mouth and you'll lose everything. James stiffened. I don't recall sending that message. Elena produced the phone records. Phone company logs show it was sent from your device at 1:17 a.m., shortly after Jessica arrived at her mother's home. Someone could have used my phone, James suggested weakly. Like the someone who installed tracking software on Jessica's phone without her knowledge. The same software that led you to Emily Winters' apartment where Jessica was hiding. James's jaw tightened. I was concerned about my wife's whereabouts. Any husband would be concerned enough to bring a gun to threaten to kill her. I never threatened, James began, but Elena cut him off. Multiple officers testified that you pointed your weapon at the bathroom door where Jessica was hiding and said, you want your daughter. Patricia, what's left of her? Were all those officers lying too? Color rose in James's face. They misinterpreted, just as Gerald Hoffman misinterpreted when you asked him to process fraudulent property transfers, just as Rachel Moore misinterpreted when you told her Jessica wouldn't be a problem much longer, just as Marcus Winters misinterpreted when you paid him $5,000 to scare Officer Williams. James's control finally snapped. Patricia Williams orchestrated this entire witch hunt. She never thought I was good enough for her precious daughter. She manipulated Jessica, turned her against me, just like she turned everyone else against me, including the medical examiners, the forensic experts, the digital specialists who found the tracking software you installed, the county officials who testified about your fraudulent property transfers. Elena pressed, her voice rising to match his. She's a cop, James shouted, half rising from his seat. She has influence. Enough influence to make you forge Jessica's signature, to make you punch your pregnant wife in the stomach, to make you track her phone and threaten her with a gun. She deserved it. James exploded, his face contorted with rage. Always questioning me, checking the accounts, talking to her mother behind my back. She needed to learn her place. A shocked silence fell over the courtroom. James seemed to realize what he had done, slumping back in his seat as Valdivia closed his eyes in defeat. No further questions, Your Honor, Elena said quietly. Judge Santos called a recess, but the damage was done. James Anderson had revealed his true self to the jury, not the polished businessman claiming persecution, but the enraged abuser who believed his wife deserved violence for questioning him. When court resumed, Valdivia attempted damage control, but his redirect examination only gave James opportunities to dig himself deeper. The defense rested its case that afternoon, earlier than expected. Closing arguments were scheduled for the following morning. Jessica and I spent the evening at her new apartment, preparing a simple dinner while discussing the day's dramatic developments. I never thought he'd actually admit it, Jessica said, chopping vegetables with steady hands. Even when he was hitting me, he'd always say afterward that I had provoked him, that it wasn't really his fault. Abusers rarely take responsibility, I noted, setting the table. But Elena pushed him until his mask slipped. Will it be enough? Jessica wondered. For the jury to convict combined with all the other evidence, I believe so. But juries can be unpredictable. Jessica placed a protective hand on her growing belly. Hope was kicking like crazy during his testimony, almost like she knew he was lying. I smiled. Smart girl already, taking after her mother. The following morning, the courtroom was packed for closing arguments. News of James's outburst had spread, drawing even more spectators and media attention. Elena Martinez stood before the jury, her manner confident but not triumphant. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 weeks, you've heard testimony from medical professionals, law enforcement officers, financial experts, and multiple witnesses who have painted a consistent picture of James Anderson as a controlling, abusive husband who resorted to violence when his wife began questioning his financial deceptions. She reminded them of the evidence, the medical reports and photographs of Jessica's injuries, the forged documents, the tracking software, the testimonies of Emily Winters and Rachel Moore establishing a pattern of abuse, and finally, James's own damning words on the stand. The defense would have you believe this is all an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by a vindictive mother-in-law. But ask yourselves, could Officer Williams somehow coerce doctors to fabricate medical reports, force financial experts to create false evidence of fraud, convince Emily Winters to invent abuse that mirrored Jessica's experience years later? And most importantly, could she somehow make James Anderson declare on the witness stand that his wife deserved to be beaten for questioning him? Elena paused, letting the question hang in the air. The evidence before you isn't a conspiracy. It's the truth, supported by documentation, expert testimony, and the defendant's own words. Jessica Williams deserves justice. Her unborn daughter deserves to grow up in a world where men like James Anderson face consequences for their actions. I ask you to deliver that justice with your verdict. William Valdivia, visibly less confident than when the trial began, approached the jury. His closing argument attempted to salvage what he could from the wreckage of James's testimony. My client spoke in anger yesterday, provoked by aggressive questioning designed to elicit exactly that response. His unfortunate choice of words doesn't negate the possibility that this case has been influenced by Officer Williams' position and personal animosity. He urged the jury to separate the domestic violence allegations from the financial fraud charges, suggesting that while James might have been controlling or even verbally abusive, the physical violence and financial crimes were fabrications. Reasonable doubt exists in this case, Valdivia insisted. And where there is reasonable doubt, you must acquit. Judge Santos delivered her instructions to the jury, explaining the legal standards for each charge and the concept of reasonable doubt. The jury was then sequestered to begin deliberations. Jessica and I spent the waiting period at her apartment, trying to distract ourselves with preparations for the baby's nursery. Martha joined us, bringing paint samples and fabric swatches for the crib bedding. Yellow, Jessica decided, holding up a soft, buttery shade. Warm and hopeful, the distraction was welcome, but tension remained as hours stretched into days. The jury deliberated for 3 full days, raising concerns that they might be deadlocked. On the morning of the 4th day, we received the call the jury had reached a verdict. Back in the courtroom, Jessica sat beside me, clutching my hand as the jurors filed in. Their faces revealed nothing as Judge Santos asked if they had reached a unanimous verdict. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor, on the count of domestic violence in the 1st degree. How do you find? We find the defendant, James Anderson, guilty. Jessica's hand tightened in mine as the foreperson continued through the charges: assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, fraud, forgery. Guilty on all counts. James sat motionless, his expression blank as the verdict was read. Valdivia placed a hand on his arm, murmuring something, but James shrugged it off. Judge Santos thanked the jury for their service and set a date for sentencing, ordering James to remain in custody, as the bailiff approached to lead him away. James turned to look directly at Jessica. This isn't finished, he said, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet courtroom. Mr. Anderson, Judge Santos warned sharply. The bailiff took James's arm, but he resisted for a moment. You'll regret this, he called to Jessica. Both of you. "Remove the defendant," Judge Santos ordered, and James was finally led away, still glaring over his shoulder. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Michael Ellison stepped forward to speak on our behalf. "Justice was served today. Jessica Williams has shown tremendous courage throughout this ordeal, and we are grateful to the jury for their careful consideration of the evidence. We ask for privacy as Ms. Williams continues to heal and prepare for the birth of her child." Back at Jessica's apartment, the reality of the verdict began to sink in. James had been found guilty on all counts. He would be sentenced in 3 weeks, likely to a significant prison term given the severity of the charges. "It's really over," Jessica said wonderingly as we sat on her small balcony. "He can't hurt us anymore." "The criminal case is over," I corrected gently. "There will still be the divorce, custody hearings, possible appeals." "But he's in jail. He can't track me or threaten me or—" She placed both hands on her stomach. "He can't hurt Hope." I nodded, understanding her need to feel the finality of this chapter. "Yes, you're both safe now." Martha arrived with a cake decorated with yellow flowers, a celebration of both justice and new beginnings. David Rosales stopped by briefly with news from the Attorney General's office. "The RICO investigation is expanding," he informed us. "They've uncovered connections between James's pawn shop and organized crime operations in 3 counties. Hoffman is cooperating fully, implicating several other officials in the property fraud scheme." "What does that mean for James's sentencing?" I asked. "It means additional federal charges are likely, even if he somehow manages to appeal the state convictions, which is unlikely given the evidence. The federal case will keep him behind bars for decades." This news brought a deeper sense of security. James's threats as he was led away had left a shadow over our victory, but knowing he faced additional federal charges made those threats ring hollow. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jessica's divorce was finalized on grounds of cruelty, with the judge granting her full custody of the unborn child and terminating James's parental rights based on the criminal convictions. The fraudulent property transfers were reversed, restoring Jessica's inheritance and removing James's name from the house deed. Jessica sold the house she had shared with James, unable to imagine ever living there again, with part of her inheritance. She purchased a small 3-bedroom home with a fenced yard in a quiet neighborhood, a fresh start for herself and Hope. I helped her paint the nursery the warm yellow she had chosen, setting up the crib and changing table, arranging stuffed animals and tiny clothes in anticipation of Hope's arrival. 3 weeks after this verdict, we returned to the courthouse for James's sentencing. Jessica, now 7 months pregnant, moved with the dignified grace of a woman who had reclaimed her life from the hands of her abuser. Judge Santos listened to impact statements from Jessica, Emily Winters, and several victims of James's financial schemes before delivering her sentence. "James Anderson, you have been convicted of serious crimes against your wife, your unborn child, and your community. You abused your position of trust, used violence to maintain control, and showed no remorse for your actions." She fixed him with a stern gaze. "I sentence you to 25 years in state prison for the combined charges, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. James showed no reaction beyond a muscle twitching in his jaw. As he was led away for the final time, he didn't look back. Outside, beneath a clear blue sky, Jessica took a deep breath. "Now it's really over," she said, and this time I didn't correct her. Whatever legal proceedings might follow, the essential truth remained: James Anderson no longer had power over her life. "What now?" I asked as we walked to the car. Jessica smiled, her hand resting on her belly where hope grew stronger each day. "Now we live, Mom. We just live." "Push, Jessica. That's it. One more big push, Dr. Maria Gonzalez encouraged. I held Jessica's hand as she bore down with a determined grunt, sweat beading on her forehead. After 12 hours of labor, Hope Williams was finally ready to make her entrance into the world. With a final heroic effort, Jessica pushed, and moments later, a new cry filled the delivery room, indignant, powerful, alive. "It's a girl," Dr. Gonzalez announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Jessica's chest. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Jessica's exhausted face transformed with wonder as she cradled her daughter for the first time. "Hope," she whispered. "You're finally here." I watched through tears as my daughter held her daughter, the circle of life continuing despite all attempts to break it. Hope had her mother's chin and delicate fingers. She had Jessica's determined expression, even as a newborn. She was entirely herself, not a reflection of James Anderson or his violence, but a new person with her own future to write. Martha waited in the hallway with a yellow blanket she had knitted, and David Rosales stopped by with a teddy bear wearing a tiny police uniform. Michael Ellison sent flowers, and even Elena Martinez and Diane Reynolds called with congratulations. 2 days later, I drove Jessica and Hope home to their yellow house with its nursery painted the color of sunshine. As I helped settle them in, Jessica looked around her peaceful living room with a contented smile. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she admitted. "After everything with James, I thought I'd always be looking over my shoulder, always afraid." "And now?" I asked, cradling Hope while Jessica prepared for a much-needed nap. "Now I know I'm stronger than I ever imagined." She touched Hope's tiny hand. "We both are." In the months that followed, Jessica blossomed as a mother. She returned to work part-time when Hope was 4 months old, her employers creating a flexible schedule that allowed her to balance career and motherhood. She continued therapy with Dr. Anna Quiroga, working through the trauma of her marriage and learning to trust again. I adjusted my schedule at the station, taking weekend shifts so I could help with Hope during the week. Chief Warren, chastened by the public support for our case, finally promoted me to detective, a position I had earned years ago but had been repeatedly overlooked for. James Anderson's appeals were denied, and the federal case against him resulted in additional charges and sentences to be served concurrently with his state time. The investigation into his criminal network continued to expand, implicating political figures and business associates throughout the region. One evening, as autumn painted the trees in fiery colors, Jessica and I sat on her back porch watching 6-month-old Hope practice rolling over on a blanket in the grass. Her delighted giggles filled the air as she discovered this new skill. "Do you ever think about him?" I asked quietly. Jessica considered the question. "Less and less," she finally replied. "Sometimes I dream about that night, the beating, the escape. But when I wake up, Hope is there, and those memories lose their power." I nodded, understanding. Trauma never disappeared completely, but it could be integrated, its sharp edges dulled by time and new experiences. "You know," Jessica continued, "in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for what happened." I looked at her questioningly. "Not the abuse," she clarified quickly. "Never that. But the journey afterward, finding my strength, rebuilding my life, having hope. I discovered who I really am through surviving him." Hope rolled over successfully and looked up at us with a triumphant grin, as if to punctuate her mother's words. "She'll never know him," Jessica said softly. "She'll know only love and respect, never fear or control. She'll know her mother's courage," I added, "and that's the greatest gift you could give her." As the sun set over the peaceful neighborhood, Hope babbled happily on her blanket, reaching for falling leaves with curious fingers. Jessica watched her daughter with eyes full of love and promise. The night that Jessica had collapsed at my door seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. In the darkness of that moment, I couldn't have imagined the light that would eventually emerge, not just justice for Jessica, but hope for the future. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you have fought with everything you had to protect your child? Have you ever had to stand against someone who seemed to have all the power and advantages? Comment below and share your thoughts. I'm curious to see how far this story reaches, and how many others might find strength in knowing they're not alone.